Hello, welcome everyone to Feardromida, the very first episode, actually. So, we are your hosts. I'm Stevie Joe,
I'm the announcer.
and we are going to be the people you are stuck with for however long this recording goes. I guess we should start with a little opening segment about who each of us are.
I
Announcer,
guess. I guess.
you want to go first, or should I?
You should go first.
All right. Well, then that also puts me in charge of explaining why we are going to tolerate each other for however long this podcast goes for.
Hmm.
So, howdy. I'm Stevie Joe. I am a cryptid gun Christian enthusiast. I like Taco Bell, Pepsi, and I've been announcer's friend for around a decade, figured.
Yeah, around that.
Yeah, around then. We met in sixth grade, and then we kind of been stuck with each other ever since. I saw like a Dalek in your middle school
Yeah,
locker,
it all
and
it all started. It all started with the Dalek figurines that
it
I had
all
in my.
started with Doctor Who. There's
Yeah,
got to be a Doctor Who creepypasta we could read through, right?
that'd be great. That'd be great to read.
Anyway, so little bit of context for why I think I'm at least slightly competent enough to be able to be reading creepypastas to an audience. I did speech and debate for all 4 years of high school. I went to nationals twice as a sort of backfill, I guess. I went for like one of the events that you take as like a backup in case you don't make it in your original event. So I got in on a technicality, but I was still selected. So I guess there's that. Ironically enough, I did humor, drama, duo, and readers theater for my events. Ironically enough, the two drama events I did were both originally creepypastas. Both of them were by the author Vincent V. Cava, and it was A Favor for a Favor and Picture This. So we are definitely going to have to read through these so that way I can nostalgia trip. But today we are going to be reading some different ones just because we think they would be fun. We're kind of experimenting with something, so all of them are vaguely related around experimentation. I probably shouldn't
Good.
get too deep into this and let an announcer actually talk this time.
Well, I mean, this is your idea for the podcast. So talk away.
Well, you still have to introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah.
Announcer, introduce yourself. Yo.
Yeah.
And that's all you do.
Um.
Like, no, actually introduce yourself, man.
I'm the announcer. Unlike Stevie, I'm not a cryptid enthusiast. Horror has never really been my thing. So in all actuality, this is Feardromida is him dragging me through the world of creepypasta, and all of my reactions are probably going to be genuine to this. Not that his aren't going to be genuine. He's just, again, he's been around the block of the creepypasta neighborhood, and I'm getting a tour for the first time. Why do I? Because you gave this whole thing about like, oh, I feel qualified for speech and debate. I just like to read stories and write stories. It's fun. They're fun. They're interesting. I've always
I
been
agree with that. I also like writing and reading stories.
because you kind of had this qualification thing. I'm repeating myself, aren't I?
A little bit.
Where'd I go?
It's
Where
our
was I
first
going with that?
episode. Nobody gives a shit.
Nobody get well. You gotta make a good impression.
So, I guess going into what he kind of tried to jumpstart. Yes, I had the idea of like, hey, let's read creepypastas. So to get to the elephant out of the room, yes, this is going to be similar in style to Creepcasts. They were an inspiration to this. No, we are not going to try to directly copy them. All the story we have like a list on on like my phone notes app that we're just going to be picking off at random when we want to. We'll be like, oh, this one looks interesting, and then we'll pick it and do an episode on it.
None of these are.
So
I wouldn't say well picked, but
they're
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 picked
ones
because they're
I've
like
listened to, so I know that they'll at least be entertaining enough to read through. And again, they're a huge inspiration. I don't want to be a direct copy of them. We're not going to be able to produce as much content as them because we do have lives outside of the podcast. Not saying they don't have lives, it's just they have a lot more stability when it comes to recording these types of things, as opposed to us where we don't. So we'll try to come up with fun new content and yeah, I guess free shout out to Creepcast from people who have no business shouting them out because we are not even remotely on their level. And so again, yeah, I'm the horror fanatic. I like creepypastas. I like spooky shit. Announcer doesn't, but for like the
Uh,
past 3 years, well, you're not as much of a horror fan as I am. Yeah,
yes, that
for the past 3 years or four, multiple years, he's been like, "Hey, Steffi, why don't we start a podcast? We should start a podcast. I want to start a podcast." And I'm always like, "No, that sounds like a horrible idea. That is going to go insanely bad, insanely quick."
well, here we are.
Here we are on a podcast, so I can cross that off on the basic white guy bingo card that I have.
Yay.
Start a podcast with a friend. Neither of us are competent, neither of us are professional voice actors or readers, so it's really just two idiots reading creepypastas and giggling at dumb jokes that we make to each other. Which is really the point of this podcast is I want him
And
to listen to creepypastas because whenever I recommend them to him outside of a professional setting, he's always like, "Yeah, I'll listen to it maybe," and then he never does. And so this is my excuse to force him to do that.
and you're going to watch it with
You're
us.
as in the audience or me?
Yes, you're as the.
I had to double check because you like responded way too anyway. So we have that really bad introduction out of the way. So quick kind of us hoping for the best kind of schedule. We'll at least have the episode where we read and react to the story up at once a month. And then if I get enough space in my schedule or if announcer has enough space in his schedule, we'll release a second version where it cuts out all of us just giggling and joking and all that stuff. And it'll just be the straight reading in case you guys don't really want to hear us joke and giggle and it's just a flat reading of the creepypasta.
Because we say some stupid stuff.
We're going to be making jokes throughout the entirety of each of these stories. So if that's not your thing, there are better channels for flat readings. We'll try to kind of Frankenstein a flat reading of it, which after recording, we will probably have to talk about like how we're going to edit down the flat recording, or that's going to be a bridge when we cross it. So
We should. I feel like we should have discussed a lot. Started, but
yeah, this was kind of a spur of the moment type thing.
I mean, we can. There's always post production editing.
Post production editing, woo!
Yeah.
Anyway, so
The savior of all projects.
I guess without further ado, let's get to the first story, which is a classic. I feel like everybody who has even heard of creepypasta knows about this one. It is the Russian sleep experiment. So, announcer, opening question. How long have you ever stayed awake?
Full day,
Full
24
day?
hours.
Full 24 hours? Announcer, I'm certain that you've heard of the Russian sleep experiment like outside of Feardromida, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have
Um,
the essential gist of it, right?
yeah, when I was a kid, I watched a.
Yeah.
I thought it was a real thing.
I think that was kind of the thing with a lot of people because when I
Yeah,
heard about it as a kid, I was also like, I can't believe the Russians did that.
yeah. Like I can't believe these damn communists. I can't believe they do
And we're
that.
already banned from Russia. There we go.
But I always thought it was a real thing.
Hmm.
So I'd watch videos on it, and they would present it as it was like a real thing. Of course, I wasn't. I was too terrified as a 12-year-old or 11-year-old or 7-year-old, whatever I
However old
was
you
when
were.
however old I was, to look it up and be like, "Is this real?" And find that it's a story. it was only up until about, I think, middle school. I think it was around the time that I met you that I finally figured out that that's not real.
Hmm. So a lot of creepypasta stuff, or at least there's kind of the early creepypasta stuff. A lot of it was like trying to say it's real, like this actually happened. Kind of in the
Well,
urban legend type thing where it's like the hooked man, like you've heard that story, where it's the guy with the hook and he
no.
attacks the couple at the cabin and the woman
Oh
drive.
yeah.
Yeah, that one. Or like cryptid stories, like the Rake's popular creepypasta,
Hmm. Well
the
then,
Slender Man, that's a popular one, but it's like all these different types of urban legends, and people try to convey creepypastas as like this actually happened when it's all just kind of
I
BS.
remember, I remember in like 2011, 2012, or 2013, there was a big craze that Slenderman was real.
Hmm.
Do you remember that?
Yeah,
Like
I think that was around the Slender Man stabbing.
it was, yeah.
We
And
can
then
we'll probably
I
go
think that
in more depth about that next episode because that's
that's when
that's going to
we
be
were
a
reading Slenderman.
topical, yeah,
Yeah,
or a Slender Man story because Slender Man is really complicated. But
yeah.
would you like to start off our first creepypasta with Russian sleep experiment, or would you like me to read?
I'd say you start with this one
All right.
because you compiled these stories together. So I think it'd be nice for you to read.
I guess it's only fair. And then if there's a stopping point that you want to hit to like make a comment, just interrupt me. I can start a few lines back and continue reading.
Perfect.
Alrighty. So this is the Russian sleep experiment. Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed circuit cameras, so they had only microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole sized windows into the chamber to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on but no bedding, running water, and a toilet, and enough dried food to last all 5 for over a month. Test subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised, falsely, that they were to be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversations took on a darker aspect after the 4 day march. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were, and started to demonstrate severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternately whispering to the microphones and one way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think that they could win trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected that this was an effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them started screaming. He ran the length of the chamber, repeatedly yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 hours straight. I'm going to take a quick little midsection break. When was the last time you've read the Russian sleep experiment, or listened to it, or any of that?
A long time ago. I don't remember any of it.
Okay. So you're kind of going in fresh, but
Yeah, I know the kind of general.
yeah, general gist. Just kind of starting off with like, what's your general thoughts so far of it?
I like it. It's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I think partly the way that it was so believable that it was real is that the style that it was written in
Mm-hmm.
is something very much that could happen. Now I don't know about this gas that keeps people, the toxin that they're using,
They just have
but
aerosolized white monster and they just pump it into the chamber. I say as I sip Baja Blast from a margarita glass.
yeah, but it's definitely interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I definitely don't hold back on the gross. It's written as if
As if it's like
you
a
are,
research log or something like that.
yeah, as if you're pulling out the files and reading through it.
And I think it also works a little bit just because of kind of that Cold War feel. I don't know when exactly was the Cold War. Hold on.
Essentially from the 1950s to like the 80s ish.
Okay.
Um, there's I say it started right as we got to the Korean War because it
So
was definitely Russian influence and U.S.
World
influence.
War II started 1939.
39,
So this would have
yes.
been like right in the middle of World War II. That's like premium Soviet Russia, right? Or communist Russia
Hmm.
at the least. So it part of it is believable simply just because of Russia's past and how they've treated their citizens beforehand.
And
Where
now
it's
we also have events like the Holocaust and stuff like that.
yeah, but that's Nazi Germany. But it's still like in that section of the country where it's like they take these people and they give them these false hopes and dreams of freedom and salvation and all this stuff in order to further their own goals, whether that's to eliminate a race of people or gain more scientific knowledge to use against their enemies.
Yeah,
And I think that's where this becomes extremely interesting is it even if you do a very surface level look at some of the experiments that even Cold War Russia did. A lot of it is just extremely heinous and messed up. Granted, America during the Cold War wasn't any better, and I'm slightly tempted to say America wasn't the absolute saint that most history texts say America was, especially after
during the
the
Cold War.
bombing of Pearl Harbor and all that stuff. But it
Yeah,
still goes to show like during like these like wartime countries, they dehumanize political prisoners and prisoners of war a lot more and believe that stuff like this is okay to do to them because they're the
and
enemy and we're trying to learn how to destroy the enemy.
that's partially why it's such a believable thing.
Hmm.
Just with the time too. And I was bringing up like Nazi Germany. I meant like the SS and their
Hmm.
secret UFO experiments. Like if that's real, this could very much be real. I mean, it's the writer did a very good job looking at the time, looking at the area, looking at whether they knew it or not. There was definitely like they they were able to ground it in a world,
Well,
make
even
it
then,
seem
it
more believable.
like gas weapons were used in the last Great War, so why
Yeah,
wouldn't gas weapons be used in a similar manner this time around?
yeah,
Granted, in a different style, since they're using a gas weapon in order to drive people insane
enhance.
rather than kill their enemy just outright. And the effects of like what happens when you're deprived of sleep, I think that's also pretty interesting because what is it like 12 days before it's lethal to
Yeah.
yeah, your brain
So
starts
for
like going through
30,
brain death or something. I don't.
so for 30 days,
For 30
it's a bit
days
of a
is
stretch.
borderline impossible, even if you are being like, regularly fed and all that stuff. What is it?
Yeah,
They're like 9 days in, someone already ripped out their or like screamed their vocal cords to pieces.
yeah. So they're nearing that 12-day mark, nearing that
Yeah, we
point
are.
of lethality.
So 3 days. That is the 12-day mark as we get back into the story. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it impossible that no sound could be coming with 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in that chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, it was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at very heavy level of strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they said they would not do to get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom inside the chamber, hoping to provoke any response from the captives. They were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced,
We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor, or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your immediate freedom.
to their surprise, they heard a single phrase in the calm voice response.
We no longer want to be freed.
I'm gonna jump back out of the story real quick. In terms of like creepypastas and stuff, especially like creepypastas that are really close to being realistic, it's slight things like that kind of help amp up the fear factor because it like the prisoners originally went in with the expectation that they're all going to be freed at some point.
Mhm.
And the researchers, as far to their knowledge, understand that freedom is still something that they can dangle in front of them in order to be able to be like, dance in our little rat maze for us. We're going to free one of you. And for them to just get the response of that's no longer a bargaining chip is haunting in a sort of way. It puts you in the perspective of the scientist, and it's a show of how much control they are. It's an early sign to show how much control they don't have over the situation. I just
Yeah.
thought that was interesting.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I'm agreeing with you. I'm curious to see where it goes. Again, because I'm blind reacting to
Mm-hmm.
this.
It's been a couple of years since you've done this. I know where it's going to go, but that's just because I'm a little more familiar with the story. Debate broke out among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed of the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately the voices from the microphones began to object. Three different voices began begging, as if pleading for their life of loved ones to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. Four of the five subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state that any of them in life. The food rations past day 5 had not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject's thighs and chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Precisely how much of the water on the floor was actually blood was never determined. All four surviving test subjects also had large portions of their muscle and skin torn away from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth as the researchers initially thought. Closer examination of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most, if not all of them, were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the rib cage of all four test subjects had been removed, while the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remained in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs had been ripped off, exposing the lungs through the rib cage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out around the eviscerated but still living bodies of the subjects. The digestive tract of all four could have been seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that what they were digesting was their own flesh that they had ripped off and eaten over the course of days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternately begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fall asleep. So, I think part of why this impacted so many people, especially at such a younger age, because I'm pretty certain that there are still people to this day who think the Russian sleep experiment is real. For clarity, I don't think I need to, but for clarity, it's not. I probably should have clarified that so much farther back. But part of what puts the impact on this is it doesn't hold the punch for what they find in the chamber afterwards. It delivers it really well, at least in my opinion. Where like
And right away.
these soldiers walk in and everybody's just eviscerated themselves, which I like because I'm a body horror type of guy. The Thing is one of my favorite movies of all time.
And it's a lot more real reading because this is how, back to the, it seems like it's written by the researchers. This is how the researchers would write it: is soldiers walked in, this is what happened.
Hmm.
There would be no
They walked in. This is what they find.
there'd be no atmospheric detailing.
Hmm.
They just It's just matter of fact.
Getting back into the story. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and an artery in
Oh,
his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth.
Jesus.
His testicles got ripped off. Oh my god. Every guy was just like, oh.
Oh! Back to my point of they don't hold back. They're just writing it down. They're just jotting down notes of what happened, a report, an incident report.
Yeah, this is kind of like an incident report of Comrade
That's what I like.
Broskowitz. What the hell happened?
What happened? Well, you see, Doctor.
Well, you see, someone's testicles got ripped off. I wrote it here. I highlighted it even.
Would you like a drawing? No.
All right.
Anyway,
Anyway, just taking a moment to just collect your thoughts after that. Another 5 of the soldiers lost their lives if you count the ones that committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. Dang.
damn, couldn't be me.
Bruh. Couldn't be me. I don't know, but if I saw a bunch of eviscerated homunculi running in and ripping testicles and throats out, like I'd take it like a champ.
I just go home and drink beer.
No, this is Russia. It's vodka.
Well, I'd go home and drink vodka.
In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen rupture and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 10 times the human dose of morphine derivative, and still fought like a cornered animal, breaking the ribs and arm of one doctor. When heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes after he had bled out, to the point where there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even after it stopped, he continued to scream and flare for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach and repeating the word more over and over, weaker and weaker, until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to a medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords and continuously begging for the gas, demanding to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had, in the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body. It was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative they had given him to prepare him for surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas was brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier was holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered and closed, his heart stopped. In the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table, it was found that his blood had triple the normal level of oxygen. His muscles that were still attached to the skeleton were badly torn, and he had broken 9 bones in the struggle not to be subdued. Most of them were from the force his own muscles had exerted on them. The second survivor had been the first of the group of 5 to start screaming. His vocal cords destroyed, he was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he had only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested, reluctantly, they try the surgery without anesthetic, and did not react for the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon presiding stated repeatedly that it should be medically impossible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisting the surgery stated that she had seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times, whenever his eyes met hers. When the surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must be something of drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched for the patient so they could write his message. It was simple.
Keep cutting.
The other 2 test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had been injected with a paralytic for the duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patients laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subjects could only follow the attending researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they were soon trying to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried asking why they had injured themselves, why they had ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. Only one response was given:
I must remain awake.
All three subjects' restraints were reinforced and they were placed back into the chamber, awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers, facing the wrath of their military benefactors for having failed the stated goals of their project, considered euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, a former KGB agent, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber, again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints padded for long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all three stopped struggling the moment it was let slip that they were going back on the gas. It was obvious that at this point all three were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs against the leather bonds with all his might, first left, then right, then left again for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for EEG, most of the researchers were monitoring his brainwaves in surprise. They were normal most of the time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if they were repeatedly suffering from brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling of the brainwave monitor, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut, and at the same moment his head hit the pillow, his brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed the same flatlines as the one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as three researchers. One of the named three immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subjects, still restrained to the bed, as the remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room.
I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you.
He screamed at the man strapped to the table.
What are you?
He demanded.
I must know.
The subject smiled.
Have you forgotten so easily? The subject asked. We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you all, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot tread.
The researcher paused, then aimed at the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined as the subject weakly choked out.
So, nearly free.
And that was the Russian sleep experiment.
I liked it. I like that one.
It was a very fun one. So
It's very good. It's very well.
it makes sense why this hit so many people, especially in like the early internet days. Because when did Russian sleep experiment come out?
I don't know. Obviously,
I'm checking the entry on.
the videos that I were watching were like 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So it was.
It came out in 2012.
Okay.
Or it at least came out on creepypasta.com in 2012.
I see.
So it is a very old story. Or at least old in 2025. There's actually a movie called The Sleep Experiment, where it basically just recaps the Russian sleep experiment.
Yeah. I don't really have much to add. I really like
Hold on.
the story.
I do have things to talk about with the sleep experiment movie, because when did that come out? 2022. Okay. That's even more frustrating. I'm going to take the wild assumption that you've never seen the sleep experiment.
No.
All
not
right.
the movie.
I think it is a really decent movie, as long as you've never read or seen the Russian sleep experiment.
Okay.
And part of why I say that is because I'm one of those assholes that's like, the story's better than the movie, the book's better than the movie. Like,
Well, I don't think that's like an objective opinion. No, that's like a genuine opinion that people have.
And I'm just saying, like, sometimes people are just really snooty about it, and I'm one of the snooty people. I'm sitting on my high horse right now when I say that. Not anything against the filmmakers, I just don't like the direction they took with it. Because part of my issue with my dislike for what they did with the movie. First off, rather than it being Russian researchers during World War II to a bunch of prisoners of war, it's British.
Hmm.
Like, it's British researchers. And that might just be because of the restrictions of the budget or where they were able to film or any of that stuff. I just feel like, especially with like a World War II era story, it makes a little more sense that the most inhumane experiment is done either by like Nazis or communists. Like you could very well get the same effect from the story if it's from a Nazi research facility, because there was this like one Nazi scientist. He was called like Doctor Death or something like that, and he would just
Yeah,
perform some of the most heinous experiments on people.
yeah, awful guy.
So, and you're the historian, so you'd probably know who it is better than me, but
I
it,
haven't done much research on him yet. I plan to. I plan to do a bunch of deep dive research into what the SS did during World War II.
a lot of bad stuff. Regardless, like again, as stated earlier, I don't think there was really any saints during the war, but you definitely had your kind of point at them. Yeah, those guys are bad guys, you know?
Yeah, you
Soviet
could easily
Russia
point. Yeah,
or
you could easily
Nazi
point at
Germany.
Soviet Russia, Nazi Germany, Japan,
Hmm.
imperialist Japan. Italy didn't do shit.
They flip flopped a lot.
Well, yeah, but they also really didn't. Like, if you look up what did Italy do during World War II, the Google responses, well, they were part of the Axis powers. Well, they were
Hmm.
there.
Wasn't Russia part of the Allied powers?
Yes, Russia was allied.
So I
Um,
that makes me even more confused why they decided to swap to British. There very well might be a reason. I just haven't done enough research as to why. Like you still have that whole like the Allied powers weren't the best. I feel like maybe it's the whole like everybody does the whole secret Russian World War II Cold War experiment thing. The Russian sleep experiment definitely made that a sort of trend. But
yeah, there's a big trend in, like, especially like shows like movies like Indiana Jones
well,
that takes the Nazi research aspect. So it's very possible that they like didn't want to be the movie to beat the dead horse, but it's also very clear, like in World War II, France, Britain, and America were all racing against Russia to get as much conquered of Germany first,
mhm.
right? And that's genuinely why Hitler killed himself, is because Russia was there first.
Yeah,
He
Russia
would
was going to get
have,
to them first.
yeah, he would have rather gone with the United States. So it wasn't like the United States was like, oh, Russia, and they're like, okay, we gotta, this guy's on our side, but it's gonna be worse if we let him win. We're just gonna have the same thing.
Hmm. The whole like
So
enemy of my enemy thing.
yeah, so I don't get why it was British. Maybe because the only actors that they really had were all Brits. Who
That's what
knows?
I'm guessing. I think there was like a Scottish dude and like an Irish dude, and you know the whole beef between Ireland and Scotland. So that obviously led to tensions whenever everybody was sleep deprived.
Yeah.
Then a bunch of British people, and it very well might have just been who they were able to get casted.
Hmm.
Another thing I didn't really like about about the Russian or the sleep experiment movie is that whole speech at the end of the Russian sleep experiment where it's like we are what you sedate into paralysis with the nocturnal haven and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That was given by this like mad scientist type character rather than one of the people who were actually, which is why I also think that it's even dumber to have it be a British person because they had to like forcibly manufacture why something so inhumane was happening. It's like, oh yeah, he was a psychopath who just wanted to do this for kicks. Because he also goes in this really long diatribe about like, I've always wanted to push people to their limits and see what kind of pain I could inflict without them breaking, or something dumb like that. And it's like you didn't need to do that with like
The
Soviet
Russians.
Russia because they're like, oh yeah, we can do this because you're anti-communist scum. This is just
Capitalist pig.
this is divine punishment or something like that. I don't know communist rhetoric, but
Or of like, more really of the fact of like they're just dehumanizing. Like you're the
Mm-hmm.
subject, I'm the researcher.
Mm-hmm. And it also adds to like that whole kind of subplot of like the researchers or main plot of the researchers just lost complete control of the situation and it got way out of hand
Mm-hmm.
because like it still kind of got out of hand in the movie. Like one of the big buff, I think it was the buff Scottish guy, went on like this rampage and killed a bunch of the subjects and then killed a bunch of guards. And then that was like how the sleep experiment ended, was because someone went on a rampage and killed a bunch of people. As opposed to like what it would have been, where it's like you get to see medically what happens to everybody and how much they lost themselves because they were stuck on that stimulant gas and forced to stay awake for
Well,
what was it,
then
15
there's
days?
yeah, then there's also this really important plot line of, and I don't think it's looked at a lot. The researcher shoots the military commander.
Yeah, the researchers didn't really
Um,
want to do it or like start it back up.
and and you had that in a lot more cases in Russia because there was cases in like the Battle of Stalingrad where soldiers would run forward towards the opposing German forces, and Russian officers would hang back, and if you ran back, they'd shoot you. So there's a lot more moments like that where a researcher, a lot more believable moment, a researcher would take his gun and shoot a military commander in between the head, in between the eyes, right?
Well,
Like that's a
none of the
very
scientists
important.
shot any. I don't think any of the scientists shot any of the like military people, but
Hold on.
which I also think is kind of dumb because it's like that.
One of the named three immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun on the mute subject as blew his brains out. This is the researcher.
Hmm. I was talking more from like the sleep experiment movie. I don't.
Oh,
I
the
don't
movie.
remember any of the scientists like drawing the gun, like shooting a military
Yeah,
officer
because
because it's like seal them inside because it's a bunch of British people and they're like, oh wow, that was a terrible idea. Let's just shut this entire thing down. And it's like that.
yeah, because the Red Army, the Russians were very much do it until it works, right?
Hmm.
And I know I keep bringing up the Battle of Stalingrad, but that's really important because they were there for so long, and they it was a bloodbath for one side, and the Germans were just running out of ammo. Like they were just like throw more until it works, or do it till it works, or if it doesn't work, kill the people that made it not work.
I throw a bunch of disposable soldiers at the problem until they fix it, or until the bodies stack up high enough to where I can walk over it.
Yeah, there's that, and in the British fighting, like the British, they were very much all on the not they didn't always agree, but they were pretty much on the same page of like this is bad. We need to work together to stop this bad.
Hmm.
So there wouldn't have been a military commander so filled with greed to be like, seal them in again. We're gonna see what happens if we keep them on the gas.
In fact, we're going to seal you three in as well.
Yeah, there wouldn't have been that. So there's not that really
There
important.
wasn't that.
Exactly. So I feel like it kind of takes away some of the, because again, how I said at the beginning, this is a very well grounded story because it
Hmm.
takes a very common villain that we all know. We all know Soviet Russia was bad in the 40s.
I think it adds
Realistic
just enough realism and just enough like science fiction to where it
to
like if you think about it hard enough, yeah, no, a person can't just sit around for 3 days with your guts hanging out, just like, hey guys, what's going on? Because that level of trauma would put someone into shock. Granted, they were not mentally well, but.
yeah, and then it doesn't explore the effects of the gas fully, which the military
Hmm.
commander wanted, but the researchers saw that these people were like awake during a procedure where he was reorganizing their organs
Hmm.
and putting them back in.
But like I say that because it it's a nice, they do the balancing act really well, and I think that's part of why it was impactful, was because they balanced it really well and they threw the punches when they were necessary. Like when it was revealed that these aren't really people anymore, they're monsters, they kept hitting you with like how monstrous they become. They kill a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
guards, they rip off a dude's balls, they stay awake during surgery and request that they get cut more. Stuff like that.
It went from the researchers dehumanizing them to them being unhuman,
Mm-hmm.
and the researchers realizing what was happening.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So again, it's really the honestly the Russian aspect of it.
I feel like we should probably
If it,
clarify that we're not saying that Russia or Russian people are evil.
no,
I feel
no,
like people might take it that way, but we're saying
I'm
like
saying 1940s Russia. That aspect really kind of grounds this. If it was the German sleep experiment, it'd be the same level believable.
Mhm.
In fact, it'd be a little more believable because there
it might
is
be a little more
textbook evidence.
believable to like history buffs because they'd
Yeah,
look into like Dr. Death and like all the crazy shit that guy did.
yeah, and then again back to the SS UFO, right?
Mm-hmm.
It
I don't know what that is, but I'll
oh
nod and shake my head like, yeah.
the SS tried to make a UFO. This is a real thing. Like they
Okay.
tried to make a flying saucer, like a circular flying object.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah, they had a lot of strange experiments. In fact, I'm not going to go on a big rant, but in fact, Germany, if it weren't for a special task force that was sent out to prevent them from this, they would have had nuclear power, like a nuclear generator and a nuclear bomb. They would have had that before we did.
That's actually kind of scary to think about.
Yeah, they were
Wait, was it like an American task force to be like, let's
it was a combination. It was an allied task force, and I don't remember the story, but I know they were like the Germans only needed one more ingredient before they could start experimenting with nuclear power,
hmm,
and they were delivering it on a boat to some area where there was a dam. I don't remember, but I think they blew up the dam and
why
just
hasn't
flooded the
that
whole
become like
place.
a Call of Duty mission yet?
That it would be a really good mission, and it would be a really good movie too, because I feel like it's rarely mentioned that the fact that the Germans built the rockets, right? Like NASA hired the guy that built the V2 rockets to build the Saturn V to send us to the moon.
All right, NASA
NASA.
Nazis.
Yep, and then
They
the
also made
Germans had
Fanta. We can't forget
they
about the
had
Fanta.
well they had the first jet fighter, and the Allies, and they revealed it.
The
In
Volkswagen.
a
That was made
Volkswagen.
by Nazis. Blow up sex dolls.
Well,
Like Nazis
yes,
made a bunch of
yep.
stuff.
They made a bunch of stuff. But can you imagine how terrifying the first fighter jet is when all you see is a blur and you're in a propeller plane? They made that. They made the first
Blur
fighter
and
jet,
the
and it
only
had
thing
like
that's trailing behind is a paratrooper, and you go take a closer look, and it's just a blow up sex doll.
you're really on that blow up sex doll thing. I think you're projecting. I think you're projecting. You might be projecting.
Okay. Let's not get too crazy now. I'm more focused on the Fanta. I'm just
Yeah, but
trying to be funny.
You mentioned the Fanta once. You mentioned the Fanta once.
I mentioned it twice.
I'm just.
Three
you
times
mentioned-
now. So I've arguably mentioned the Fanta more.
You're at the same. You've mentioned the sex doll a little bit. At the same amount.
I feel like you're
Anyway.
mentioning it. You're putting more emphasis on mentioning how much I've mentioned it.
Anyway, our next story is Gateway of the Mind. I don't know anything about this one.
This one's also technically like an experiment one. I didn't realize how short it was, so that's my bad. I really like it. I think it's very interesting, but since I read pretty much all of Sleep Experiment,
I will do Gateway of the Mind. In 1983, a team of deeply pious scientists conducted a radical experiment in an undisclosed facility. The scientists had theorized that a human without access to any senses or ways to perceive stimuli would be able to perceive the presence of God. They believed that the five senses clouded our awareness of eternity, and without them, a human could actually establish contact with God by thought. An elderly man who claimed to have nothing left to live for was the only test subject to volunteer. To purge him of all of his senses, the scientists performed a complex operation in which every sensory nerve connection to the brain was surgically severed. Although the test subject retained full muscular function, he could not see, hear, taste, smell, or feel. With no possible way to communicate or even sense the outside world, he was alone with his thoughts. Scientists monitored him as he spoke aloud about his state of mind in jumbled, slurred sentences that he couldn't even hear. After 4 days, the man claimed to be hearing hushed, unintelligible voices in his head. A
Assuming it was onset psychosis, the scientists paid little attention to the man's concerns. 2 days later, the man cried out that he could hear his dead wife speaking with him, and even more, he could communicate back. The scientists were intrigued, but were not convinced, until the subject started naming dead relatives of the scientists. He repeated personal information to the scientists that only their dead spouses and parents would have known. At this point, a sizable portion of scientists left the study. After a week of conversing with the deceased through his thoughts, the subject became distressed, saying that the voices were overwhelming. In every waking moment, his consciousness was bombarded by hundreds of voices that refused to leave him alone. He frequently threw himself against the wall, trying to elicit a pain response. He begged the scientists for sedatives so he could escape the voices by sleeping. This tactic worked for 3 days, until he started having severe night terrors. The subject repeatedly said he could see and hear the deceased in his dreams. Only a day later, the subject began to scream and claw at his non-functional eyes, hoping to sense something in the physical world. The hysterical subject now said that the voices of the dead were deafening and hostile, speaking of hell and the end of the world. At one point, he yelled,
"No heaven, no forgiveness."
for 5 hours straight. He continually begged to be killed, but the scientists were convinced that he was close to establishing contact with God.
Yeah, that sounds like establishing contact with God.
Heaven
After
doesn't
another-
exist.
Sorry.
No, you're good. Charlie has been out at night.
All the demons are gay. Why are they all gay? Give it a few more minutes, guys. I think he's about to meet God.
That totally sounds...
A radio demon? What are you?
Why is this demon a snake? Why's he got a top hat?
It's the top hat specifically that confuses him more.
Why are you all wearing bow ties?
This shows way too much of how much we know about Aspen Hotel.
After another day, the subject could no longer form coherent sentences. Seemingly mad, he started to bite chunks of flesh off of his arm. The scientists rushed into the test chamber and restrained him to a table so he could not kill himself. After a few hours of being tied down, the subject halted his struggling and screaming. He stared blankly at the ceiling as teardrops silently streaked across his face. For 2 weeks, the subject had been manually dehydrated. Due to the
Rehydrated.
constant... Oh, my bad. For 2 weeks, the subject had been manually rehydrated due to the constant crying. Eventually, he turned his head, and despite his blindness, made focused eye contact with scientists for the first time in the study. He whispered,
I have spoken with God, and he has abandoned us.
and his vital signs stopped. There was no apparent cause of death.
So what did you think of that one? It was very short and to the point.
Very short, very to the point, but it was very
Entertaining read.
It was very
Especially-
entertaining.
A very quick, entertaining I like how, sorry, I'm reading the comments on this.
Oh,
The
there...
top one is, yum, tasty pasta.
I think that's more just like, oh, it's a creepypasta, so creepypasta, pasta. I like eating pasta. So if you look a little bit below the story, there is a YouTube video that is connected with the Gateway of Divine Creepypasta. Hold on, I'm gonna mute it, so that way...
I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah. Turn the audio off, because I do think the audio might be copyright, but you don't have to watch too much of it, but...
I'm watching it with audio. I might be watching it with audio.
If you just go to the little volume bar, you can just click on it and turn off audio.
I know. This guy must have felt...
This man must have been tripping balls.
Well, evidently, if you've seen, like, dead relatives and stuff.
very good story.
very, very, despite... I wish it was a little... but that's...
You
that's
wish it was
kinda,
a little what
that's
you
kinda
cut out there.
longer. I wish it was a little longer of a story. But that's just my personal preference of, like,
You
It's a
like
good
longer
concept.
stories and all that.
I like longer form stories. Especially, I write longer form stories.
Do you have any published work, or is it just like, oh, I typed this out because shits and giggles?
It's all for shiggles.
Okay, same.
It's all for shiggles.
I do think the story gets a little... Like, obvious, you could kind of... It's a creepypasta, it's trying to be scary and all that stuff, and so I think it gets a little heavy-handed with the whole, like,
God has abandoned us and heaven doesn't exist anymore.
and like all that stuff. For the purpose of what it's trying to do of being this nice little bite-sized scary story,
Adam
I think
called
it does.
himself the Dick Master. I'm going to hell.
I'm just saying heaven doesn't exist so I can hang out with all the gay demons.
This is spoilers for Hazbin Hotel, but the angels don't know how a soul gets into heaven.
Do any of them know how any of them
No,
get into heaven? Because
That's actually the
is that the big
Lot
twist? The
twist.
angels are
That's
just
the-
like, you get into heaven because you, uh, um, because we say so.
it's a
Maybe.
little less than that. It's actually like Charlie and Vaggie are in like parts of heaven, and they're trying to argue their case why a soul that has already had its chance should have another chance to go to heaven. And they're like, well, what are the requirements to get into heaven? And Adam writes down like 3 things. It's like, don't kill, have sex, stick it to the man. And I'm like, do you not know? He goes, I mean, I was alive and then I'm here. So it was,
Yeah. So I don't even think the
There's-
writers knew how you get into heaven.
well, there's a little book. I don't know if they've heard of it.
The Bible.
Yeah, it's literally a guide of how to get into heaven. So I don't know how you could not figure this out, guys.
It answers all your questions.
Like, this plot hole did not need to be here, guys.
What if we write a show about heaven, but nobody knows how you get to hell, and nobody knows how you get to heaven, but they all act like they know?
And that is the Vivzy Pop writing team, or Spindle Horse.
Splendid blurs.
And this
but-
channel is already getting a lawsuit.
Uh-oh, Vivzy Pop blocked us on Twitter.
We laugh about it now, but we won't be laughing when the DMCA comes and bites us in the ass.
We'll just cut that out. We'll just cut that
No,
out.
we won't. We're keeping that in there because I enjoyed at least talking about it.
Cut this part out then, of us talking about cutting it out, but we're not actually going to cut it out. But we're gonna cut this part about us cutting it out.
Now I think you're just making it too complicated now. Getting back to the proper subject matter and getting away from the gay demons. I think it would be honestly horrifying to just have all of your senses just stripped away from you.
Yeah, because he can't feel.
He can't feel, he can't see, he can't even smell or taste anything.
Oh gosh. Sorry, I just like imagine what food feels like. You know, there's no taste, but like,
Apparently, like, smelling is also like how you taste stuff.
kinda, yeah.
My dad's nose doesn't work too well, or like it doesn't work or something like that. So his level of taste is completely different from how normal people would taste because smell affects how you taste stuff that significantly.
But now also here's another. Sorry, I just thought of this perspective of the scientists when he looks at them. Like this guy full on looked at them and went, "I met God, and He has abandoned us."
That's got to be scary too.
Could you imagine? Like you're like, I know that guy cannot see. I
cut his
eye out."
eyeballs myself.
Yeah. Also, again, the chilling fact of like, you know, you're sitting in like this guy's in an empty room and you can see him and you've got cameras and everything. He can't see you, and then he just starts listing personal facts about your deceased family members.
Or just personal facts about you that nobody else would know. For example, you're in that room, and the old guy's just like, "Announcer, you shit yourself when you were 5." And then, now that's awkward. Imagine having to eat lunch with a person who overheard that. Like with me,
Yeah,
I'd make
but
fun
also-
I'd make fun of you for that. 24/7.
I think another another terrifying portion of this is the fact that they were right
Yeah, that
in
they
their
could
experiment.
cut
Like,
someone's senses
the
off and meet
senses-
God.
The senses were what blocked us from meeting God. That's got to be terrifying because, like, in a sense, you.
From what it sounded like, he didn't meet God because what the hell, but
But from what you know, they're probably not the best people in the world. Like, there's got to be another like unsettling factor to your right in this, and you have to go home now with all of your senses and know that like you are prevented from meeting
just beyond
God.
just beyond the veil of what you're able to perceive, there is God.
Is your yeah, and also the deceased family member demons. Yeah, there's got to be a terrifying thing about that for the scientists. I don't care how mentally
unstable they are, there's still a wow, my microphone quality got a lot better when I got closer.
Who'd have thunk
There's
it?
still would have thunk. There's still a, for lack of better terms, a mind fuck when you walk out of that and you're like, oh my god, I was right. I didn't really want to be right, but I was.
I think it's one of more the thing of you don't realize that you didn't want to be right until you were actually proven right.
Yeah,
Because I'm
especially
certain
'cause
all
this-
of them went in with like, yeah, I want to meet God, and then that happens, and they're like, never mind, that sounds horrible.
Never mind, that sounds terrifying.
Because
Like,
does it say like how many days he was stuck in there, or
it says we could tally it up here.
2
quick if
days?
you want.
Okay, yeah. You keep count. I'll look for.
Hold on. Like, yeah, keep counting all. Or you look for them and I'll keep count.
4 days plus 2 more days, so 6 days. 2 weeks because it adds a week, and we're pretty much already at a week.
So is the total at like 2 weeks?
So pretty much, yeah. 2 weeks later, 15 days because after another day. Yeah, so 15 days, same amount of time as the Russian sleep experiment. What is it with just like stripping something from For example, if I get rid of caffeine for 15 days, will I meet God? Probably not, but
No. But there's also a really interesting thing about this. You hear, and it's just a normal thing. Like I was researching like tips on how to grow a YouTube channel because you know if you're wanting to start one, you always look it up.
topical.
Yeah, topical. One of them was like get sleep. It's really important. And
Don't cut your eyes out.
like all of these things of like this stuff is don't cut your eye. Well, yeah, but like this stuff is important to the functionality of a human, and to strip that makes them not human
Well,
is
I wouldn't
really
say.
interesting. Well,
Oh,
it-
I
it's
see where you're going now. I see where you're
it,
going
it
now.
it's a transforming them into something not human, and it's very.
How much can you take away from a human until they just become something else? Is what you're trying to
Yeah.
get at.
Yeah, how much? Yeah,
15
more
days without
deprived.
sleep, that'll turn them into a monster. Getting rid of all their senses, they'll meet God. That won't turn them into a monster, but they'll meet God. So I guess that's kind of cool.
And then meet God and then die, unexplainably.
Well, I think biting giant chunks out of your body has at least a little bit to do with why
Well,
they
I mean,
die.
there's that, but he just like
I've met God. He's pissed.
Yeah, there was that.
Yeah, I guess.
But it's a very interesting concept of depriving humanity of otherwise mundane things because you don't view touch as like a virtue of being a human. You can just touch things. You can just see things. You can just smell things.
So have
can
you ever
just
been in
taste things.
have you ever been in an instance where you just completely lose like a sense?
I have not been in an instance where I lose a sense, but I have been in it lost my voice.
I don't think that's
And
exactly the same thing as the gateway to the mind thing.
It's not like senses, but I have lost my voice.
Hmm.
Period of time.
So I can think just off the top of my head one instance where 100% for certain I feel like I lost a sense. And for context, this is a little bit of a short story. So I was 12, I think, maybe younger. I was doing this volunteer thing for Boy Scouts where we worked at like the snack cart at a haunted house. So we were selling people candy and popcorn and all that crap. While these scare actors were running around and scaring all the people. I found it funny. They scared us a few times. It was just a hoot. And part of the benefits of like, oh, you get to work the haunted house, all that stuff, you actually get to go through it for free because you're working it. I went
Yeah.
through it once. And for the most part, I was fine. It was mainly just people jumping out at you and going, "Rah, blah, 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 blah."
Yeah.
There's this one.
Job
It was like a
application.
haunted clown asylum, I think was the theme, because that was when
I see.
that was when clowns were really big. So there was
Yeah,
this
right
one
around
section we were walking through the asylum. This girl jumps out and screams at us like, "Do you want to play with my dolls?" And it's like, "No, maybe another time. Bye bye." And we keep walking. And I remember this because I was with my friend. And I'm going to mention one other thing before I get to the actual point of the story. There is this one section where you had to get on your hands and knees and like crawl to this tube, and the tube would rotate, and then you'd be standing back up, and you like continue walking through.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Me and my friend walk up, and there's this group of like 3 to 4 college kids just standing there, and they're like, "Oh yeah, go through, go through." Keep in mind, we're both like 12 or 10, 10 or 12, somewhere in that range. We were kids, effectively. And there was this group of college students, and they were ushering us through. We didn't think any of it. We were just like, oh, they must be part of the thing. So we go through. And now to the actual point of the story. There was this section where it was a maze, effectively. And it was completely pitch black. You could hold your hand up to your face like an inch away, and you would not be able to see your hand. And that compared with, I kept bumping into some people, and they'd get scared because, oh, something bumped into me in the dark, and so they'd scream, and then I'd scream, and then me just not having the visual stimulus of I can see what's going on, so I can understand, like my brain couldn't comprehend, I can't see what's going on, and it just broke me. And I crumpled down into this puddle of tears, and the scare actors had to go and get me out and walk me out and all that stuff, along with another group of people, because they're like, oh crap, a kid's crying, they're really scared, let's go comfort them. And you want to know the funniest thing about that whole thing? The people we got stuck in the pitch black maze with were the same people who ushered us through the little tunnel. So they weren't even part of the act. It was just a bunch of college students who just saw these 2 kids walking through a haunted house and was like, ah, yes, sacrifices. And they just sent us through. It was divine comedy that we just bumped into each other. It was so funny.
Do you remember?
Anyway,
when
that
you were
was my
younger,
that was my own first and only time ever entering a haunted house. I have not been to one since.
I'll tell a really quick haunted house story, and it was a haunted corn maze story, which I think we should do this year.
Sure.
But it was really funny. I was walking around, and they had this guy with a chainsaw.
Oh, I think I was there for that. I've been to
Oh,
yeah, he like snuck up behind you, and I'm like, "Oh, hey dude, how's it going?" And I just saw this guy visibly deflate, and you're like, "Oh, thank goodness his chainsaw didn't work," and he revs it in your face.
yeah, he just
Yeah.
well, yeah, because you go, oh hey, how's it going? And then I turn around, he's like, like, it doesn't work.
I think it's
Just
even
running
I
away.
think it's even funnier because I think he had like the Jason Voorhees mask on, and he walks
Uh-huh.
up, and I'm like, "Oh, hey Michael," because I thought it was Michael Myers, like an idiot.
My name's not Michael.
And so I think part of him deflating was like, "Dude, I'm off. Come on, man."
I'm not Michael.
That dude was chasing us like all night. I'm pretty sure we
'cause
got
I
chased
was-
by him like 3 or 4 times.
I was in a very obvious outfit. Like you could spot me through the maze.
What
'Cause
was
I was
it?
in like it was my lighter color London fog trench coat.
Okay. God, I
So it's
forget
like-
you
it
wear
was-
suits everywhere.
Well, yeah. Anyway, despite the point, I don't know if you remember this, but there was a box maze that a youth group did that we.
I do remember that. And they had like
That-
glow stick tag.
No, they didn't have glow stick tag. You just went through the maze, and you had to collect like glow sticks. It was like a Slenderman.
Yeah,
Like, find my pages.
One night they did do glow stick tag because I do remember going to that.
I do remember that. But
That
remember how
that
we
I
had a-
I understand
we had a-
exactly what you're talking about because that
yeah.
oh that
Well,
I think that's where my claustrophobe, like my inability to go caving, came from because that
Yeah,
also
but-
like terrified me.
I remember a moment where we were, because we had a group of 4 of us, and we had this. Me and you had this idea. It was a very well thought out idea of we're going to stick together. We're going to grab each other's ankles, right?
I don't think that
hold
really
on to each-
worked.
Well, no, it didn't, because I slipped and I let go of the. I was the last guy. I was the one at the end, and I let go of one of the guy's ankles. Gone. I could not find you guys. I was split up entirely from the group. So I spent that whole time looking for the group, but I couldn't. You can't. Yeah, you just can't see anything. You can't. You can only see your hands on the cardboard floor. But I mean, like back to this. This guy couldn't see a damn thing. So that's got to be.
I
couldn't-
I imagine his blindness to be like the same level of like blackness from that haunted house or that cardboard maze. To where, like, you
Yeah.
stick your hand in front of your face and you just do not see your face.
No, like you don't see your hand, but he can't smell, he can't feel, so he can't. If he presses
He
his
can't
hands on
even.
his face, yeah,
Yeah,
he
he was
can't. He
clawing
can't.
at his face, so he doesn't even get, like, the same level of stimulation as
It's
we at least could feel, like, the cardboard on our hands, and I could feel myself bump into the wall in the maze. Like, we at least had something to ground us to the fact, like, yes,
yeah.
I'm
He
still
can't.
here.
He can't feel, so he is in an ethereal, like almost in an.
I
It's got to feel like floating to him. It's gonna feel like he's floating.
it, I couldn't think of anything else for that. Anyway,
No.
the last one that we have is the Harbinger experiment.
I can read this one if you want.
I'm fine reading it because it looks like there's a lot more dialogue with it.
Whatever you want.
I don't really know if there's an author for this one either. If there is, we'll be sure to throw up the credit for them in post processing. This is actually the first story that I do not have any context for. I do not know how long it is. I do not know the content with. Oh, this looks like a really long one. So,
Yeah, it is really long.
but I don't have any context for it. I've tried listening. All I can really say is I've tried listening to it few times, and every single time I didn't get too far, and I don't remember any of it. So I'm effectively as blind as an announcer on this when we go into this one. So let me take a swig of Baja Blast. Alright, and now we get into the Harbinger experiment. The world we live in is full of things we don't understand. Being the curious humans that we are, we naturally try to seek these things out. Doing so has led us to remarkable discoveries and inventions that we never could have imagined 100 years ago. We have defeated disease, built to the sky itself, and even created machines that could take us beyond the clouds and into the stars. If our ancestors could see us and what we have created, I'm sure many of them would see us as gods. Paragraph in, and I'm already hooked. That was a beautiful paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
Our innate curiosity and lust for knowledge has not always led us to greatness, however. True evil and darkness have also been uncovered in humanity's conquest of knowledge, and in the end, I fear this evil will be our doom. I do not say this from the standpoint of a great philosopher who has sat and simply pondered things either. No, I say this because I have seen it, experienced it. I was part of it. The event I'm about to relay to you is true in its entirety. This I swear. I feel certain that this will fall on deaf ears, and many of you will believe this to be just another spooky story meant to give you cheap thrills. But I promise you that this is neither my intent nor my purpose. The purpose of this story is to simply warn you of what lurks beyond the veil of what we can see and understand, to show you what awaits us in the darkness, even if I myself do not understand it. What I am about to tell you has happened, and I feel certain it will happen again. In 1971, a not-so-well-known scientist began preparations for an extremely secretive project known simply as the Harbinger experiment. I would like to keep the identity of this scientist secret for personal reasons, so throughout this recounting I will refer to him as Zimmerman. Zimmerman's background is unclear at best beyond 1971. All that I know about him before that time is that he had grown up somewhere in Maryland with a strange fascination of the occult and supernatural. This later made him an outcast among his fellow scientists due to how scoffed upon the metaphysical was, and still is, at the time. Zimmerman's opinions concerning the otherworldly were not the sole cause of him being an outcast, though. It was his methods that made him widely unaccepted among his peers. Zimmerman was well known during his time for being ruthless and cold beyond measure. He never cared about the means. All that mattered to him was results. And if he predicted the results to be valuable enough, anything would be worth obtaining them. It was this insatiable and brutal lust for the truth that made him feared among those that knew of him, and the few that knew of him and did not fear him believed in him and followed him and his work closely. Alright, so pulling back again. I'm not going to do this consistently just because we got a lot to get through. My initial kind of belief, I think Zimmerman and the narrator of this story are the same person.
Very possibly the same person. Again, we'll have to. I don't think so yet, but we'll have to go through.
This is me just kind of having spun the block of creepypasta. I'm pretty sure Zimmerman and the narrator are the same. Also, I forgot this. So, a common thing with creepypastas is, or some creepypastas, a lot of creepypastas will try to write themselves to be like, listen, I know this is on creepypasta, but it's not a creepypasta. This is real, guys. As kind of like a lazy way to ground the story. I was bought in with the initial paragraph, and then I kind of pulled back on my excitement when that happened.
Yeah, I don't mind it because I haven't been around the block of creepypastas a lot, but it doesn't seem like another like, oh, it's real, guys, it's real. I swear to God, it's real. Oh my God,
You guys,
listen to me, listen
you
to me.
guys need to believe me.
It's more of like a, it's more of like this is an excerpt taken from a biography, right? Of like it's true in its entirety,
Yeah.
and it's not crazy ramblings of a 13-year-old being like, this is real, I swear to
Heaven
God.
has
don't."
abandoned us, guys.
Yeah, it's more of like an in character writing. This is true in its entirety.
Okay. I'll give you that.
That's how I view
I'm
it.
not saying that I'm completely bought out, but that definitely has made me a little hesitant on this.
Well, again, because you've been around the
Yeah.
block of.
So I was just pausing to give my initial thing. I think Zimmerman is the person telling us this story.
Oops.
And the arc is going to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get results. And then he gets a little too good of results, and he's like, you know what, I'm going to become a moralist now. And
You know what? I'm gonna tell people not to do this because
this is no bueno, everybody.
this is no bueno.
Have you considered snipping a guy's
Not.
eyeballs so that way he can see God is not the best thing to do? I mean, only controversial takes here on the podcast, guys. Anyway, back to the story.
Yeah.
The word harbinger itself has such a mysterious and intimidating taste to it. Maybe it's the way it rolls from our tongues, or maybe it's simply due to its association with the project. But the word always seems to carry a certain amount of doom with it. Which would make sense. The word itself means to warn or forebode. I can't imagine Zimmerman's reason for giving the experiment this title, but in retrospect, it fits perfectly. Alright, I'm pausing one more time. I know I just said I'm not going to pause too consistently, but I have a funny thing about the word harbinger.
Yeah.
So there's a character in a book
Oh.
series called Monster Hunter International, and it's, to give a spoiler-free example of it, when I was a kid when I read this series. It's by Larry Correia. I highly recommend reading it. He's a great author, and if you like guns, you're going to like these books. So I cannot recommend Larry Correia's books enough. Besides the point. So the leader of the Monster Hunter organization's name is Harbinger. When I was a kid, I didn't know what the word Harbinger. I'd never heard it before. Or if I did hear it, I never saw it written out. So whenever I read it, I'm like, that's a weird name. What does that sound like? I always read his name to be Harib Inger.
Herabinger.
Harib Inger. And so whenever he's like fighting these monsters, it's like Captain Harib Inger shot the vampire in the face, and I just would read it like that. And then I learned that it's Harbinger, and it's, oh, the name's a little silly now, but
Herabinger.
anyway, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to get through at least 6 more paragraphs before I stop again. Unless announcer stops us for whatever reason, but that's on his own
So far,
volition.
I don't.
Yeah, if you have a comment, feel free to interrupt me. Zimmerman came to a select few, me being one of them. Oh, well, there goes my theory. Zimmerman came to a select few, me being one of them. He told us he was working on something big, and that he needed people who could keep confidentiality and not spread idle gossip of his work. Well, he did not fully trust some of us. He did know that we were professionals and that for some reason or another, we were all in dire need of employment. I had worked at the local clinic as a doctor, but I was caught stealing medication and was promptly fired. This left a very dark mark on my resume, so work was hard to find. I was also a native to Alaska and lived near where the experiment could take place. So I guess you could say I was a convenient choice. As you can imagine, I jumped at the opportunity. It was hard not to when I saw the payout. 15 of us were hired in total. Some were colleagues of his that has been working with him for a while. Some were maintenance workers and a few were hired as private security. I was the only medical professional to be hired. It is still a wonder to me how he even attained the funds necessary for the experiment. I would not be wholly surprised if his financing was not entirely legal. But legal or not, I needed the money and he was paying. Looking back, it's a decision I have come to regret. After Zimmerman obtained his money, he used it to buy a relatively large plot of land deep in the frozen wilderness of Alaska. And upon that piece of land, Zimmerman built a concrete structure, not dissimilar to a bunker, in fact. The sole difference being that its goal was to keep any potential damage contained within the structure rather than keeping it out. As he put it, most of the structure dug underneath the earth, which had the effect of making the underground complex seem so much similar than it really was from the outside. As would be expected, there was only one way of entering and leaving the underground structure, and it was via a ladder that led from a small unassuming concrete building on the surface, which I refer to from now on as the entrance building for convenience, to the network below. After everyone had gone to bed that night, the hatch that contained the ladder would be sealed off with a very large and thick metal lid. Zimmerman was very strict about this. Located not too far away from the entrance building was a series of wooden cabins that would serve as the sleeping quarters for the staff Zimmerman had hired. Compared to the entrance building standing on the surface, the underground system was massive. At the center of the complex was the control room. This is where all the facilities, electronics, and such were linked to. This included security cameras, lights, and door controls. Consoles, monitors, and computers lined the walls of this large central chamber. This is also where the ladder in the entrance building connected to the underground complex. Connected to the control room were 3 doors. One led to a smaller room that served as the infirmary. Another door led to a break room, and the last door led to into the hallways. The hallways where the complex began to feel extremely eerie. They were, for some reason, laid out in an extremely confusing scheme that led in circles to the complete dead ends. These hallways made up a vast majority of the complex, and it would be very easy to get lost in the maze if you were unfamiliar with the complex. But if you knew where you were going, you would find yourself standing before one of 3 8-by-8-foot rooms before long. Each room had a camera hooked up to one of the corners of the room, and all 3 of those cameras were connected to a corresponding monitor in the control room. Cameras were also scattered throughout the hallway so that whoever was watching their corresponding monitor could see anywhere they wanted to when they wanted to. Thick metal doors stood at the entrance to each of the 3 8-by-8-foot rooms, and in order to open them, you would have to enter a 4-digit code into a panel located near the door. So there's a nice little stopping point. Firstly, I'm
Very detailed.
very detailed. It's like this little complex on the surface where it's a bunch of cabins that lead to this concrete building that leads to this bigger underground complex that has a bunch of halls that twist and wind like a maze, and a bunch like 3 8-by-8, or was it 3? Yeah, it was
Yeah.
3.
3 8-by-8-foot rooms.
With just a camera in there, and we don't know what's supposed to be going on in there yet.
I can pick up reading from here if you want me to.
I can keep reading. I'm good.
But I imagine But why these hallways are so long and maze-like is because if they're testing someone, either they're going to break out and start running, and they have a chance to close secondary doors on the control rooms and get out.
Or they get lost and give people who are actually trying to get out a chance to get out more properly.
Yeah, of like a containment breach. We'll send someone else to go down there.
We'll send like a SCP team with a map.
Yeah.
Here's a quick question. With the slight mention of how shady some of the people within this, like the quote-unquote personal security, and the doctor that is stealing pills and stuff, do you think he obtained the funds legally?
No, not
No.
at all.
I wouldn't be surprised
Not
either.
at all.
Like, hey guys, you remember that sleeping gas I gave you?
No.
Well, I sold it to you. Give me money for it. It was 30 years ago in the tundra of Russia. I'm certain you remember it now, guys. We just had a nice little stopping point, so I just wanted to get kind of a...
Yeah. I am excited to see where this is gonna go.
I will say it does a decent job kind of hyping up. Because, like, it's such a intricate facility. It kind of makes you wonder, what are they really doing here?
Yeah.
My guess is they're testing on someone, like what you implied. I remember when I first arrived at the complex, how badly the hallways frightened me. I have always been claustrophobic, you see, and those hallways were so very narrow. The noise, or more accurately, the lack of noise, was also a tremendous source of fear for me in those bleak, narrow hallways. It was always so unnaturally silent, as if the entire world had stopped moving. It really made you feel like you were trapped down there. Thankfully, though, I only rarely ventured into those hallways, for I was the only medical professional in the facility, and I had virtually no reason to go into them. So, I'm stopping immediately again, but the lack of noise, how narrow it is, and all that stuff, that kind of goes back to the haunted house story that I told, where it's like really narrow. It's sensory deprivation, basically.
Yeah. Which, again, I think
You cut out.
they're doing that. Sorry. That's going to go back to my theory of, like, the hallways are long and maze-like on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
If you have, like, a deranged
Deranged scientist and all that.
or a deprived human test subject, they're not going to get very far without you seeing.
Mm-hmm. Well, depending on how fast they end up being, that might be an issue with a flat sprint.
Yeah.
With the way that they have these halls set up, and just how generic the quote-unquote testing rooms would be, because I'm imagining the testing rooms being the 8x8 rooms. It's almost like the science team's the test subject. But...
Possibly. Because it said he'll go to any lengths.
So, hopping back in. In the beginning, I found it so peculiar that Zimmerman would ask for a medical professional like me on a project like this. But by the time it was all over, I understood why. The official purpose of the Harbinger experiment was to test and observe the effects of an extended isolation on the human mind. This is what was listed on reports being sent out, at least. But unbeknownst to all those who were not participating in the project, excluding the subjects, like I said before, Zimmerman had always had an obsession with the occult and supernatural. He sought to prove himself to those who did not believe in him. He wanted physical proof that the supernatural was a real phenomenon, and he wanted to be the first one to attain said proof. The true purpose of the Harbinger experiment was to find proof of the metaphysical, a world we could not see, and the thought of doing this was naturally a tad bit daunting and even scary. But it was Zimmerman's method of doing so that was truly terrifying. Zimmerman believed that he would be able to open a portal between worlds momentarily, allowing 3 random entities to cross over to our world, and each one of these beings would be trapped within one of the 3 rooms. So, we were right. The rooms are the testing chambers, and they're not testing on people, but they're trying to capture a being.
Something. Yeah.
me being kind of the horror fanatic, I feel like I know enough about the supernatural to know not to fuck with it, but that's just me.
Oh, he's obsessed with it.
He's
willing to
obsessed
live
with it, true.
Yeah.
Zimmerman had the theory that an entity would try and latch onto the nearest living thing that had the capacity for it. He wanted to use this technique to trap a spirit in a physical form by allowing it to enter a living being that had been injected with a compound mixture of Zimmerman's creation. In theory, this compound would keep the entity from simply leaving whatever it was attached to. The only way it would be able to leave a host who had been injected with the compound was through death. According to Zimmerman, the host would have to be something living, with a will strong enough to survive the possession. And there is only one known species that possesses the amount of will required for this: humans. Zimmerman had also done something to ensure that the entities would only enter the 3 rooms and that there would only be one entity in each room. Though I cannot say I know what exactly he did, in fact, I know next to nothing when it comes to how Zimmerman managed to do what he did. He liked to keep his methodology a secret to his most trusted colleagues, most likely due to his paranoia and that someone would steal his ideas and take credit for the success of said ideas. If I had known that this was the true purpose before I signed up, I may have reconsidered. But Zimmerman decided not to tell us until we were all gathered at his fortress. Even if any of us wanted to leave, I doubt we would have been allowed to do so. The security team Zimmerman had hired was loyal to him, and the payout, it was not likely that Zimmerman had given them the order to now allow anyone to leave. There were 3 different subjects included in the experiment. All were native to Alaska, and each one was lured into the project under the belief that they would be participating in a harmless study on the effect of isolation on the human mind, as I mentioned before. Which is why none of the subjects objected when they realized that they would be confined to one of the 3 rooms that I mentioned earlier. The first subject was a young man. He was apparently out of work and desperately needed the money that had been offered for participating in the study. The second was a woman. By looking at her, I could tell she was an addict of some sort. The third and final subject was an older man, a drifter if I had to guess. One thing that they all had in common was that none of them had any family or friends. In short, no one would miss them, which is why they were chosen for the project. I am sorry. I wish I could supply more information about the subjects, but all of this has been drawn from memory, and I was given little information on the 3 to begin with. The experiment did not officially begin until 1987, 16 years after its original announcement. I was eager to begin, so I packed up and headed out to the complex as soon as I could. I arrived at the compound a week before the subjects had even signed up, and a whole month before the project even began. I was not the first to arrive by any means. When I got there, Zimmerman, his colleagues, and the security team had already arrived. I suppose you could say I was among the people Zimmerman did not trust to arrive first. Everyone had arrived about a week before the experiment began. There was a noticeable rift between those who were there simply for the money, like me, and those who were followers of Zimmerman. Alright, pausing again, we're at a nice little stopping point. We were both wrong. Actually, you were more right than I was. They are experimenting on people. This feels very SCP to me, you know?
It does. It does.
Because he's trying to capture these entities and he has a military task force in case they get out and all that stuff. Like, this reminds me a lot of, like, the SCP stuff. Along with, like, how they select D-class. Death row inmates are people who won't be missed by greater society, or no one will go looking for them.
Yeah.
And trying to get them possessed by these entities so that way he can prove the supernatural exists and stick the finger up to all the people who doubted him. First off, I think that kind of plays into nature of, like, the mad scientist thing. Because, like, in Frankenstein, it's like,
Nobody believed I could create a life from nothing, but here is my grand creation.
like that type of crap.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. I will say, I was a little hesitant, but now I think I'm bought back in. Like, I'm excited to see where this goes. So, back into the story. On October 15th, 1987, All the preparations were in place. The subjects had been sealed in their rooms, the cameras, the lights, and speakers were fully operational, and all the staff members had settled in. The time had come for the experiment to officially begin. Zimmerman asked everyone to report to the control room around 9 p.m. to witness the beginning of the experiment. He wanted everyone to be present when he proved that all his theories had been correct, and that he was not just a madman. He wanted us all to see the fruits of his labor. When everyone had officially gathered in the control room, Zimmerman turned to us and simply said,
Observe.
He then turned his back to us, leaned into the microphone that he would project his voice through the 3 rooms, and he then began chanting in a strange language that I feel certain no one but Zimmerman could understand. We all observed the 3 large monitors on the wall, silently waiting for something to happen. The subjects all stood in their room, dumbstruck by Zimmerman's chanting, staring at the monitors with confusing expressions on their faces. After about 5 minutes, I felt something awful. I cannot explain what exactly it was, but a horrible feeling of dread washed over me, riddling me with fear. It was then that the ground actually began to shake subtly, and the lights began to flicker. Zimmerman continued chanting into the microphone, as if nothing was off or wrong, while the subjects began dashing around their rooms, screaming for help. Then, suddenly, the ground stopped shaking and the monitor image turned to static. The air began to become very heavy as we all stared at the monitors, waiting for them to regain their image and show us what was happening or had happened in those 3 rooms. For a while, all was silent, but then there was screaming. The screams of a woman going through unbearable pain and terror began to echo through the compound. The similar screams of men began to coincide with the woman's terrified screams, and together they mixed into an awful symphony of pain and fear that beat mercilessly into our ears. Those of us who were here for the money began to give each other scared looks, while those loyal to Zimmerman seemed completely unfazed. We wanted to leave and never come back to this awful place, but we all knew deep down that Zimmerman would never allow that to happen. We were here for the long haul. There was no escape. It was 10:13 p.m. when the screaming finally stopped. The monitors had yet to reveal to us what had occurred in those 3 rooms. As soon as the screaming ended, Zimmerman stood and dismissed us all for the night, adding that we were all forbidden to come back into the compound until 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. Not like any of us wanted to. We all solemnly made our way out of the compound and towards the cabins and settled in for the night. I feel it is safe to say that not all of us slept well that night. I was not one of them. The following morning, all of the staff had arrived at the entrance of the building. We all stood inside exchanging tired or nervous looks as we waited for Zimmerman to arrive and open the hatch that concealed the ladder. I could see palpable fear in the eyes of some of us, while others did not seem to have been even remotely affected by what happened last night. Zimmerman showed up 5 minutes after 10, apologizing for his tardiness as he came through the door of the entrance building. He opened the hatch and, without hesitation, began descending the ladder downwards into the black abyss. He almost seemed enthusiastic. I was the first to follow behind Zimmerman's dark descent into the facility. It seemed that the farther I climbed down, the more the darkness closed in on me, as if it was trying to swallow me whole. And as I climbed deeper, I couldn't help but feel that this place was different somehow. While before there was only the unsettling concrete hallways and rooms, now there was something else. Something made the eeriness feel so real and personified. It felt like a horrible and gruesome scene awaited us down there. But I continued climbing downward, despite my fear and hesitation. This was no longer just a spooky bunker. There was darkness and malevolence in the air. A true evil now lived there, and I could feel it. We all could. I finally felt my foot touch the ground and let out a silent sigh of relief to be on solid ground. Almost as if on cue, the light bulbs came alive, dousing the room in their warm and welcome light. Zimmerman must have turned on the power, I thought. I allowed myself to take a couple of seconds to examine the control room. It was exactly as we left it last night, for which I gave a silent and thankful prayer. It was almost as if nothing unusual had ever happened. I shook myself from my thoughts as I remembered the static-filled monitors from the night before. I let my eyes slowly make their way towards the monitors on the wall, anticipating the grim and fearful scenes that would be on them. My attention was first grabbed by monitor 1 and 3, which were still pure static. It would have been a small relief, but then the motionless image on monitor 2 caught my eye. Room 2 was entirely still, and everything seemed entirely untouched. I couldn't help but gasp as I noticed the one thing that was different. The woman lay in the center of the small concrete room. An expression of fear and terror was frozen into her gaunt face as she lay silent and lifeless on her back. Zimmerman's expression turned angry when he saw this. He ordered that the second monitor be turned off, and it was. We didn't ask why. It's not like any of us wanted to see the dreadful scene any longer. He also ordered that if the images in monitors 1 and 3 did not return within the next 2 hours, the security team would be sent to investigate the rooms. The security team nodded at hearing this. They made it seem as if they had no fear, but I could see it in their eyes. The subtly loud tick-tock of the clock that was the only sound that echoed through the control room while I stared at the monitors. An hour and 50 minutes had gone by, and the static was still all that occupied the monitor 1 and 3. All of the other staff members were working except me. This was due to the fact that the project had been completely injury-free thus far, so I essentially had nothing to do but wait for someone to hurt themselves. Zimmerman, a couple of his colleagues, and I were the only ones that occupied the room. They quietly chatted amongst each other on the other side of the room, while I spent my time reading and pondering the situation I currently found myself in. I had clearly made a mistake coming here. The corpse lying in room 2 was evidence enough of this. And God only knew what waited for us in 1 and 3. My thoughts were soon interrupted as monitor 3's image returned. The clear image now displayed on screen made everyone's eyes noticeably widen. What was displayed on the monitor was horrifying. A humanoid thing stood in the center of the room, staring directly at the camera, unmoving. It was wearing the jumpsuit that Subject 3 had been issued, but this clearly was not the same man that had entered the room. What caught my attention first was his eyes. They were solid black and twice the size of normal human eyes. They seemed so endless and so cold. Its head had also grown with the eyes in such a symmetrical and unsettling manner. The being had also shed all of the hair it once had, and even from the monitor I could see how unnaturally smooth and clear its skin was. It also seemingly grown in height and stature, which could be seen by the fact that the jumpsuit was now obviously far too small for its wearer. Its limbs had grown especially long. Its arms hung almost as low as the creature's knees. What we were looking at was in no way the same man we had sent inside. Fear. Fear was all I felt as I continued to stare at the monitor, at the thing in the room, and my fear seemed to be shared by those around me, which made me feel kind of good. It may sound awful, but it was a bit satisfying to see Zimmerman and his colleagues could feel fear too. But at the same time, it was worrying because this showed that this was not part of Zimmerman's plan. Something had gone wrong. We all stared into the monitor at the thing despite our fear. It was almost as if we were in a trance. My already present fear began to grow and spread rapidly through my body as I became lost in the creature's eyes, trapped in its terrifyingly hypnotic gaze. After what felt like forever, I managed to break eye contact with the creature and divert my attention from the monitor, and when I did so, I felt my fear levels drop considerably. After a short while, Zimmerman ordered his security team to make their way to Subject 1's door, just as he said he would do. The security team left without question, armed only with batons and pistols. I focused my attention on watching the men progress through the hallways towards Subject 1's room via the cameras. Even through the not-so-high-quality cameras, it wasn't hard to tell that these men were afraid of what awaited them. Their heads were downcast as they walked. They did not possess the same confidence within them that they did when the project began. They looked like scared boys being sent off to a terrible war. Eventually, they made it to the door. We had perfect vision of them and the door via the hallway camera. One of them said something through their walkie-talkies and made a motion towards the camera. In response, one of Zimmerman's colleagues buzzed the door open. The men already had their pistols out by the time the button was pushed. Slowly, the boar. Slowly, the door. The boar. Does he know about the B-O-R-E? Huh?
Uh-huh.
The
The
boar.
boar.
You know, the door that holds the creepy cryptid monster inside.
The door.
They open the door and an announcer just walks out. Hey guys, and anybody up for a spot of tea?
Hey guys.
Announcer. Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, what's up? That's my name. Don't wear it out.
They just open the door and it's Jesus. Jesus. Yeah, what's up?
Jesus
Yo.
Christ! Yeah?
Yo.
It's time for you to feel the Holy Spirit. And he just decks one of them in the face.
They start crying like.
No, it's like that one animation where Jesus gets swatted.
Oh yeah, and he's like.
He's like
"I
doing
am the
wrestling moves on
child
them.
of God. Yeah, and he like suplexes one of them.
Jesus! He just decks one guy through the wall. You hear like the One Punch Man theme as he walks in and is revealed in the camera. And everyone's like, Jesus Christ!
Jesus Christ.
Alright. Slowly, the door began to open. We all watched eagerly as Jesus Christ walked through the door. I'm actually Slowly, the door began to open. We all watched eagerly as the man began to approach the door. Guns aimed inside. Suddenly, and without warning, there was a loud shriek as something bounded out of the room at the men. The monitor turned into static immediately. We could hear screaming echoing down the hallways, followed shortly after by the distinct sound of gunshots. We could do nothing but wait. After a couple minutes, the screaming and gunshots stopped. We all waited and prayed, hoping that whatever bounded out them from the room would not be the one to return to the control room. After a couple more minutes, 3 of the men came back, carrying with them the corpse of the 4th. He had massive cuts covering his chest, and his face was shredded. You couldn't even tell who he was anymore, or even that he was human. I was used to gore, being a doctor and all, so I felt somewhat unfazed by the mass of shredded flesh and bloodied meat they carried with them. But many of the others went pale and vomited. The security team all wore emotionless expressions and eyes filled with terror. One of the men finally looked up at us. He stared at us for a while with those wide eyes of his.
It's dead.
He finally managed to mutter in a shaken and scared voice. Alright, pausing right there.
Another good stopping point.
Yep.
Pretty good so far. I like it.
Mm-hmm.
I like it.
What do you think about Zimmerman being scared at seeing the supernatural, even though that's what he was searching for all this time?
I don't think he realized that the supernatural isn't always easily survivable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't think he realized that he, like, stuff that's unstudied. He's dealing with things that are so beyond his power that he has to control.
I think he's going through the same thing as at Gateway of the Mind, where it's you don't realize that you never wanted to be proven right until you are proven right.
Yeah, until you're proven. And considering that he might be
He might be
I lost.
what I was. I'm so sorry.
You are perfectly good. We are 2 hours into this. So far, this has been a really good story. I've really liked it.
Yeah, really good, really good.
So, first off, batons and pistols. Like, this is me just being kind of like a gun nut and all that stuff. But if you're going into an experiment expecting to discover the supernatural and experience things that are beyond human comprehension, I wouldn't give my guards pistols. Like, obviously
Well,
they would have a sidearm, but I'm giving them like ARs and stuff. Like, I'm giving them something that has a bit more firing power than just a pistol.
well, there's that, but also the
Give him a
fact that
shotgun.
there's also the fact of he might have thought.
He was
So,
definitely in over his head.
well, yes, but his theory was that they would still be human. They would just be possessed by a being, not completely transformed thing. So he was like, it's just going to be a person possessed by something, only going to be dealing with a younger gentleman, a woman, a crack addict, man, right? So he's like, we're only going to need batons and pistols to kill them because they're still just going to be human. Their strength might be enhanced physically, but
Well, get
a human
even
can still be.
even if it is just a person,
Yeah, I get what
like
you're saying.
you're
Though, with
getting
more
a
firepower.
supernatural entity, and pretty much the consensus with most supernatural like possessions and stuff. If you listen to stories of exorcists, which I haven't listened to too many, but people who are possessed by supernatural entities still inherit some of the stuff that the supernatural entity is able to do. They're able to do stuff that most people wouldn't be able to fathom. If we go more into like horror movie type thing, which this is kind of seeming like a horror movie, you should be expecting like super strength and them climbing walls and you not being able to take them down with just a 9mm pistol or even a 45 in that matter. I'm sorry for the heresy against God's caliber, but
They were able to do it. They lost a man.
yeah,
Do it.
like no, that dude got eviscerated horribly. But my point being, like, if you were going into this expecting it to just be a person who who's just like, oh, I get a little spooky voice in my head now. Even then, to a certain extent, there is a law of biology that needs to get followed. You give him a 12 gauge, you candy strip the mag tube, and then you don't have to worry about it. Because supernatural entity can do what it wants. It's kind of hard to sprint at people when it's missing half of its leg.
Yeah.
Or maybe not.
There's also.
But
there's
I'm just
also,
go ahead.
I remembered my point that I was making. I think the reason why Zimmerman could have been another reason why terrified to see it is because he knew what that creature.
He knew
Right,
what
'cause if
the
he's-
creature could do.
He knew what. Yeah, he knew what it could do. And
But it's probably because he knew what that creature was
Mm-hmm.
and how it acts and thinks. So he was probably
see
more
that.
terrified of the fact of like, oh shit, I know what that is. Go kill it before it fully
Well, no,
integrates
they're
itself.
not sending it to kill room
No, I
3.
know.
They sent it to kill the thing with the static. So he had no idea what it was.
Oh,
And they
no
they
idea.
still don't know what it
I-
is because the camera in the hallway turned to static as soon as it lunged out. So whatever it was,
Not the one that's staring at the camera.
yeah, the one staring at
He's
the camera
killing-
seems a lot more docile. I don't
He's
think it'll
killing
stay
what's in room
docile.
3.
Yeah. Room 1. Room
One.
1 is what they killed. Room 3 has just been staring at the camera.
Okay, but that was my bad.
And then room 2, the lady's just dead. You know, with room 2, what might actually be the thing is whatever he did to make sure that only one entity showed up, the entity showed up and the woman wasn't able to survive the possession process. And so the entity is still in that room.
Yeah.
That
so it
might
might just
be
have
what's
to be
going
a
on.
type thing.
That would be interesting. I'm concerned about room 3 because obviously alien, it reminds me of like how people typically describe like the gray aliens with like the big head and the big black eyes.
Mhm.
And then I'm hesitant to, I wouldn't even want to open room 2 in all honesty because it's like there still could be something in there. And since it doesn't have a body we can kill, that's that's even more concerning. So I'd just say put a concrete
Well,
wall over room 2. It doesn't exist anymore.
nuclear bomb, blow that shit out of the sky.
Well, it's not in the sky, it's under the ground. So,
Well, I'm saying you blow it sky high
and then
out of the
blow it out of the
atmosphere.
sky.
Yeah.
Okay, I can get behind that, especially with the type of shit we're seeing now. Getting back into the story, we're about halfway through. A couple hours went by. The dead man's name was Frank. He was buried outside in the cold, Alaskan ground. 2 of the men were unharmed, physically at least. The third was alive, but only barely. His body was covered in bloody slashes, and one of his eyes had been gouged out. I managed to stabilize him, but only just. The other 2 men vaguely explained what happened. Apparently, Subject 1 leaped out at Frank after the door opened. Only it wasn't really Subject 1 anymore. According to them, it had a hideously contorted face and long, sharp claws. They claimed to have shot it over a dozen times before it fell dead. And then they emptied another dozen bullets into it just to be sure it really was dead. Hell yeah.
Based.
Only once it was dead did they come back. After tending to the wounded man, I went to investigate the monitors. As afraid as I was of seeing what those monitors may have held, I needed to see. Subject 3 was the only one left, and now I needed to see it and make sure the creature was still in the room. It seemed to be more like a jail cell than an ordinary room at this point, which was probably a good thing. The cameras displaying Subject 1's room and the hallway outside it still displayed a static-filled screen. No one was sent to repair them or investigate. We just had to hope that the Subject 1 was well and truly dead. Monitor 3's image was exactly the same as I had left it. Subject 3 was still staring directly into the camera at us. He was still in the exact same position, and if it were not for the small fan in the corner of the room, I would think I was looking at a still image. In a way, I felt relief at seeing this. Relief that he was still in his room and had not escaped while no one was looking. After everything quieted down, I noticed something especially unusual. There was a strange sound emanating from somewhere. At first, it was barely noticeable. The only reason I heard it was because of how extremely quiet it was in the infirmary. But as time went by, it slowly began to increase in volume. After about an hour, it was loud enough that everyone else could hear it too. After a couple more hours, its volume had increased so that we could determine what the noise was. It was a song. One of the staff members identified it as Living in the Sunlight by Tiny Tim. Apparently, his father loved the song and listened to it frequently. The song seemed to be on a loop and kept replaying itself. Although we were able to identify the noise, we remained unable to identify its source. We all knew that it wasn't coming from the speakers because we had turned them off. It seemed to be emitting from the walls themselves. More time ticked by as we all began to become increasingly agitated by the song. I spent most of the time in the infirmary attending to Frank or in the control room. I thought Frank was the dead one.
He might be.
Okay.
All they said is that it's dead. They didn't say that Frank is dead.
No, Frank was dead at the start of it. Hold on. The dead man's name was Frank.
Oh. Autopsy, probably.
Okay, autopsy. I can see that.
No, but he was just buried. They buried him out in the cold.
Maybe it was the autopsy, like, they buried him after this, or something like that. Maybe they forgot to name the injured. Maybe it was just the Frank team. There's like the A team. This is the F team. They're all just named Frank.
It's just named Frank. Yeah.
Frank, watch your six. Thank you, Frank. Frank, I need more ammo. I'm working on it, Frank. Frank, we need medical attention on Frank. Which Frank? Frank, that one, Frank. They walk up to the entity's door. They rack the slide of their pistol. It's Frankentime.
And then the beast was so incredibly pissed by that stupid pun of Frankenstein and Frankentime that it killed one.
It killed the person that made the pun. They go up to him, they have like this really emotional moment. Frank, are you going to make it? I don't think so, Frank. Just tell my wife, Frankella, that I loved her. Oh. No, Frank! You had so much to live for!
Don't worry about Frank. We've got Glocks with switches on it.
Frank! We gotta go! The monster's gaining on us! Not now, Frank! We need to take a minute for Frank! We don't have a minute, Frank! I'll stop this. Anyway. I can't read Frank anymore. They walk into the infirmary. Is Frank alright? I'm afraid Frank's dead. No, not another Frank. Oh, wait, you meant this. Okay, yeah, no, he's fine. Oh, thank Frank.
Story.
I'll get back to the story. I spent most of my time in the infirmary, attending to Frank or in the control room. No, focus! We need to focus. I spent most of my time in the infirmary, attending to Frank or in the control room. Fear hung in the air, and the presence of unmistakable darkness and evil was no doubt its source. Subject 3 still had not moved. He had kept his unblinking gaze fixed on the camera the entire time. It always felt like he was staring directly at me, no matter where I was in the room. I think this effect was also felt by others due to the fact that they seemed to move around the room a lot and for seemingly no reason. Excuse me. After a few hours, the song was so loud that people almost had to shout in order to communicate. We had been trying to find its source so that we could turn the song off, but it was to no avail. The source was completely unidentifiable. This added a level of extreme irritation to our already very present fear. It was around 8:30 that the ground itself began to shake once again, just as it had done the previous night. Panic began to spread among my fellow employees and me as the shaking grew in intensity. During this, I had the sudden, instinctual feeling to look over at Subject 3's monitor. It was gone. Almost as if on cue, the power went out, and thankfully, the song did as well. Okay,
Dude,
this is where I have a panic attack now. Like, if I was working there, I'd be like, yep, nope, fuck this. Frank, we're getting out of here. Grab Frank.
Frank, we're getting out of here. I like how this one is like, he's like, and thank God the song shut off. like everyone's like, people are dying. This beast is killing people. He's like, thank God the song turned off.
Frank wakes up and it's like, I keep hearing, why was I hearing Living in the Sunlight so consistently? What is Living in the Sunlight? I've never listened to that.
We'll have to listen to it after the podcast.
Yeah, we can listen to it after the podcast.
Because I don't want to risk it being copyrighted.
It is 100% copyrighted, but we can listen to it afterwards.
Yeah.
But with the way that they describe the hallways, like I never said anything, but at the beginning of the story when they mentioned how the hallways were set up, I immediately knew someone's going to have to navigate that shit in the dark. And that immediately brought me back to the haunted house thing, and put in that situation. Like, I'm a grown ass man. I would still not handle that well, because it's like, okay, there's that weird alien thing. Then there's that other thing that I'm not certain is dead, and then there's whatever the hell's in room 2, and I have to navigate in this, and I can't see anything.
I like to imagine that, like, music is coming from the dead body, so it's like the
that's
the
know
scene
what,
where they've got the night.
Unironically, that's what I was thinking, is it was coming from room 2.
Yeah, but like I think of those memes where they've got like the nightcore music and then like the rainbow lights and laying on the. It's just a person
Living in the
surrounded by like.
sunlight, da 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 da. Living in the sunlight, da 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 da. And it's just a dead body on the floor.
It's just a dead body. That's exactly how I imagine. That's what I was imagining. I was trying not to laugh.
They're
but I
walking
muted
down
my
the
mic.
hallway. They have their lights up and pistols drawn. Frank, do you see those RBG? Do you see those RGB lights up ahead of us? I sure do, Frank. I'm not liking what it looks like. They walk up to it. It's just a dead body on the floor. Was that dead body always there, Frank? He turns around and Frank's gone. Frank? Where'd you go, Frank?
And it's actually the demon that they summoned was Hatsune Miku.
He turns back into the room. The other Frank's dead on the floor next to the other body. Frank! No! You bastards! You took another Frank!
And he just starts shooting the air.
Come out, you bastard! Let me kill you and avenge both Franks! No, I need to get back to the final Frank, or else all this would be for naught. I need to get back and tell Frankella that Frank loved her. I need to be the one to raise Frank Jr. now that Frank's gone.
Animated Frank series coming soon.
I want 3 seasons specifically dedicated around the F team.
Yep. It's going to be called the F Team. It's going to be animated.
Designation
Gmod.
Frank.
It's going to be animated in Gmod.
No, it's not. Please,
Yes,
we're not starting that project. No. If someone wants to animate, do like a
ruined
little
the
animatic
illusion.
of the Frank
You
saga, go
ruined
for it. But I'm not.
Illusion.
Hmm?
You ruined the illusion. We're doing advertising.
Oh. Shit, I'm sorry.
Stupid.
We're gonna make bank off of that idea. We can't just be crushing our ideas like that.
I don't feel like we could hold, because I'm pretty sure all the Franks are going to die. I hate how we refer to them as Franks, but I'm pretty sure all the Franks are going to die. I'm not really worried about it.
Back
but
to it.
back to it. Oh no, I need to find my spot. We got really distracted by Frank.
During this, I had the sudden instinctual feeling.
Yep. During this, I had the sudden instinctual feeling to look over at Subject 3's monitor. Nope, read through that. Ever since the security team came back, panic had been slowly building up among the staff, and Zimmerman was powerless to stop it. When those lights went out, the calm projections that everyone had been trying to maintain left us, and the fear in all our hearts took over. The emergency backup lights kicked on shortly after the power went out, which I gave a silent, thankful prayer for. The lights were dim, but they still allowed me to see a lot. Okay, I would have been better. If I was just wandering around pitch black, I would not have handled that well.
Me either.
I would have been like in the corner and it's like, Frank, you're going to have to carry me out.
Frank, you're gonna have to kill me.
Frank, just shoot me. I ain't dealing with this shit, man. Okay, we really need to focus on getting through the story. Total panic seized us as many of my fellow staff members began screaming and rushing to the ladder in an attempt to escape. But too many were trying to use it at once, and no one was able to get far on the ladder without someone else pulling them to the floor and taking their place. Zimmerman was shouting for everyone to calm down, but his dominating and intimidating personality had no effect here, and his demands fell upon deaf ears. It was total chaos. It wasn't long until people actually started hurting each other in their desperate attempts to get up the ladder and out of this place. I could only stand against the wall and wait for my opportunity to escape up the ladder. All the screams were soon silenced as a familiar hum of that unsettling song began to rise in volume again. Only much quicker this time, and this time it was clear that the noise was coming directly from the maze-like corridors. People stopped fighting and shouting as all our attention shifted to the door that led into the hallways. Okay, one more quick pause. This really reminds me of like those Gmod chase games where it's like the PNG image that chases you with the song. And so as you're like running away, it just gets quieter and it's like living in the sunlight, do 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 do. And then you round a corner and it's right there and it gets really loud and it's like living in the sunlight, do 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 do.
Yep.
Then there's
I
like
know
the
exactly
Gmod
what
like
you're talking
smacking noise as you get killed by it. The next line, the song quickly got louder than it had ever before, which forced many of us to cup our ears with our hands in an attempt to silence the noise. Then suddenly, the song just completely stopped. Silence. That was all that filled the room as we stared at the thick metal door in anticipation for what was coming. It felt like ages had gone by, but in reality, it was probably only seconds before the silence was broken. The door suddenly and violently burst open and the music started again. Living in the sunlight, do 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 do. Living in the sunlight, do. And it's just a dead body just sliding across the floor.
No. Gmod next spots are attacking.
It's
Quick,
one of the supernatural entities.
Zimmerman, hit Z, delete the next bot. Gonna
Okay.
kill us all.
Oh my goodness. We have
Zimmerman,
completely derailed this story.
This isn't a creepypasta anymore.
It's Gmod Nextbot Escape starring the Frank team. Okay.
Uh-huh.
The door suddenly and violently burst open and the music started again, louder than it had ever been before. The suddenness and the volume of this caused many of us to recoil by falling to the ground and grabbing our ears in an attempt to block out the noise. I glanced up for just a second, and in the doorway stood a tall, smooth-skinned figure with long limbs and eyes so dark and malevolent that you could clearly see them in the dim lighting. I'm kind of disappointed it wasn't the corpse.
Yeah.
After I got my bearings, I looked upwards at the creature, once again just in time to see the thing pick up and rip Zimmerman in half in one fluid movement.
Zimmerman,
Dousing-
no.
Zimmerman, the next spot got him! Frank, do something! I can't. I'm
Zimmerman,
jamming too hard to living in the sunlight, man.
Zimmerman, no. It got the moderator. Delete it now.
Keep in mind, like, living in the sunlight's playing. So, like, as they're just being... I just imagine, like, this slow motion, the creature ripping him in half. And as everyone's getting showered in blood and viscera, you just hear, living in the sunlight, do 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 do. But it's,
Hold
like,
on.
bass boosted.
I gotta live.
Don't listen to it. I want to keep my, like, ears pure. And like, people who have listened to it are probably cringing because I am not singing it correctly even remotely, but I find this too funny to like give up the bit for actually
It's
listening
like-
to the song.
It's like Nightcore Rockefeller is playing while like this horrifying event is happening.
1, 2, 7, 3 down the Rockefeller Street, do 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 do
Anyway,
do. Anyway,
dousing everyone in the room.
yep, dousing the room and everyone in it with his blood, intestines, and organs. I was no stranger to gore, but the sight of that was too much for me to bear. I hunched over immediately after seeing this and vomited all over the cold cement floor. That ladder is my only hope of survival, I thought to myself as I forced myself to a standing position, and as my eyes rose along with the rest of me, I could see the thing ripping and tearing through the people as they scattered in attempt to escape it. It was distracted, and as awful as it sounds, this was my only chance to get up the ladder. I forced my legs to move towards the ladder, trying to block out the terrified screams of my fellow staff members and the unbearably loud music. I could hear gunshots coinciding with the screams and terrible sounds of flesh being ripped apart somewhere in the mess of noise. I reached my hands outwards, and felt a wave of relief wash over me as my fingers came into contact with the hard metal rungs of the ladder. I gripped them and began to climb upwards as quickly as I could in my disoriented state, all the while praying that the monster would not see me and pull me off the ladder and back into the slaughter. It felt like at any moment I would feel one of its smooth hands wrap around my ankles and pull me to my death. But I eventually made it to the top. There was no question in my mind. I had to close the hatch and seal that thing down there, even if it meant certain death for my colleagues. I could not allow that thing to escape. I gripped the thick metal lid and began to push up with all my might in an attempt to seal the underground complex off. Despite how dense and sturdy it was, the lid was surprisingly easy to move and did not take very much effort to push it over the hatch. Even in my weakened state, in seconds that hatch was completely covered in the dense metal lid. I collapsed on my side and began to vomit some more as exhaustion overtook me. And as I lay there, I realized something. Aside from my labored breaths, the only thing I could hear was the faint echo of that song from down below. I felt as though I would lose more of my sanity if I continued to lay there and listen to that song. So I once again forced myself to my feet and began to make my way to the wooden lodge I had stayed in the previous night. It was where I had left my baggage and also where I left my keys to my truck. Okay, nice little stopping spot. So, I'm guessing we're kind of in an epilogue state now where it's going to kind of cool down. I really liked that entire... Like, I know we were making jokes and all that stuff, but I really liked that.
It was good. It was good, yeah.
Because you could almost imagine the guy in slow trying to run towards the ladder and the chaos ensuing in like deep
very
red
disoriented.
Lights. Yeah.
Yes, I imagine like the red emergency lighting you see with everything. So it's just this like red monochrome as he's rushing through this stream of blood, limbs, and viscera, climbing up the ladder, and it slowly swaps from like a deep red to like a color again.
Mm-hmm.
It's just such an engaging scene, and you can visualize the monster a lot more clearly. Like, I know it says it's completely smooth, but I still imagine like there's patches of hair on the monster because the transformation wasn't as clean as it could have been. Like, they say it completely smooth, but smooth as in like how you see a abandoned doll in a house.
Yes.
Or like a drainage ditch where it's like very smooth, pale skin, but there's still like the remnants of hair that kind of stuck with it through the elements.
Yeah, that's what I'm imagining with it.
It's a very strong visual, and I love it.
Very, very good visual too. He was very detailed. Mm-hmm. He gave detail, but he also at the same time he didn't and left it up for imagination. Mm-hmm. He directed you in the right path to get what he wanted out of it. So
and the scene of like how the anticipation was built up. I know we were making jokes like it's the dead body on the floor with the Nightcore playing. Like I knew it was the creature that was doing it because the creature was the only one mentioned, and I like the anticipation because it's like this build up. You're going like, what the hell's going on? Why is Living in the Sunlight playing so loud? And then he notices that the creature's gone, and boom, you're in the terror. Like, it's a bit silly. Like, you're getting this bass boosted random 90s pop song or whenever it came out. I didn't look at it. When those lights cut off and everything goes dead quiet, and you realize that whatever this thing was got out and it was trying to distract them with that song. And then the anticipation of when they hear the song again, and it's, instead of it just being an ambient noise, it's building and building and building, and you can tell how close the creature's getting by how loud the song is getting to the door before it cuts out again, and just boom, burst of noise, there's just chaos, and then in that chaos he escapes. I think that was really well built up.
So Tiny Tim, I don't know, I just want to give you this text. He was the singer, he was probably heard him, but he's that really high pitched like tiptoe through garden. That's Tiny
Oh,
Tim.
that's
So
even
that's
funnier.
this isn't Living Through the Sunlight, but he had a
I know.
very strange
Mm-hmm.
death. I think Tiny Tim suffered a heart attack at one of his performances. I know he had a very disturbing death. We'll have to do some research into that, but
Mm-hmm.
he's ever since then he's thought of as like a really weird, creepy. Yeah, here it is. On November 30th, 1996, he was playing at a gala benefit hosted by the Women's Club of Minneapolis. He had let his third wife, Miss Sue, know before the show that he was not feeling well, but did not want to disappoint his fans. Before starting his performance, most of the audience had left in the middle of performing his last number, rendition of Tiptoe Through the Tulips. That's what I was just singing. He suffered another heart attack on stage. His wife asked him if he was feeling all right, and he said he was not. She was helping him back to their table where he collapsed and never regained consciousness. EMTs performed on-site CPR and transported him to Hennepin County Medical Center, where after repeated revival attempts, he was pronounced dead at 11:22 p.m.
Okay.
So
So I guess
it's
I thought that song was really made more creepy because of like TikTok edits of people using it for like horror stuff, but I didn't
well,
realize there was like actual kind of implication behind it.
there's because he
Because like it's creepy because that's the song he died, but I don't think most people know like the context behind the song of like, oh yeah, that's
yeah
the song that killed him.
he continued on through a heart attack during that song. So, and I think you can look at the footage, watch it, which I'm
I'm
not
not going
really
to
in the
do
mood
that
to
because
do.
I don't really want to watch a man die. I see that enough on Instagram. So
Racism app.
the racism app.
All right, let's
Why are
continue.
people dying on my racism app? Okay.
Let's continue with the brief.
I'm pretty. Yep, we're almost done. This is just the last section. Of the 15 staff members that took part in that forsaken experiment, I am the only one who survived. I have never returned to that awful place where all this happened, and I don't intend to. The project was very secretive, and Zimmerman was the only one who knew all the details of it. And, as far as I know, no one is aware of my involvement aside from me. In fact, I am probably the only one who knows what the Harbinger experiment truly was, let alone what actually happened. By now, you are probably wondering why I have told all of you about something none of you should be aware of. Maybe you're expecting me to give you a speech about not messing with things you don't understand, or something along those lines. I hope not, for I have no speech to give or lesson to impart. I began hearing a noise earlier today. Almost immediately, I recognized the noise as a very haunting and familiar song. I didn't even try to trace it to its source. I knew it'd be pointless. And as the day progressed, the song was increased in volume. It's loud enough now that I can very clearly make out the lyrics. I am completely unable to escape Tiny Tim's voice. It has followed me everywhere I have gone. Subject 3 is coming for me, and I know my time left in this world is extremely limited now. I guess you could say that I wanted to tell you the tale of the Harbinger experiment before it was lost forever. I hope that you will take some lesson from what I have recounted to you, but I think we both know you won't. Let's be honest, you don't believe a word of what I've just told you, and I don't blame you. I wouldn't believe me if I were you. To you, this is nothing more than something to get your cheap thrills from. You were probably mindlessly surfing the internet when you clicked a link and found yourself here. Wherever here may be, reading this story. And to be honest, I do not care if you believe me or not. Even if you do, it probably won't stop you from trying to uncover the truth of darkness. Even if you do, it probably won't stop you from trying to uncover the truth of a darkness that few of us have ever seen. It certainly never stops Zimmerman. If you want a lesson, look at what happened to him when he went seeking the truth. I pray that none of you will ever discover this truth. I pray that none of you ever have to see the evil I have seen. I hope you all get to live in ignorance of what lies beyond the veil of what we can understand. It's here now. I can feel its black eyes burning into me, just as I could all those years ago. I am as much to blame as Zimmerman is for the monstrosity that is now free to roam the world. Even if I was not the one to create it, I am sorry. Please forgive me. And that was the Harbinger experiment.
Pretty good. I like it.
Hell yes. I love that final dialogue, or like that monologue. I really liked that. That was so good. That felt like the William Afton. No,
William Afton.
not William Afton. The
My God.
Henry, the Henry speech from FNAF
Oh,
Pizzeria Simulator,
Yep.
where it's give up your spirits. As for one of you, the darkest pit of hell, and it's like that one. And it feels extremely like this, where it's like this man's last kind of words to the world. I don't even mind necessarily that it does the whole, like, I know you're thinking of this as a creepypasta, because it, with the way that it's written and the way that he ties it all together, I feel like it does a decent enough job to satisfy what you're reading with it. I really like the Harbinger experiment. Do you have any final thoughts on your end?
No, I do not.
All right. Well, then we will do one last thing before we wrap it up for this episode of Feardromida. I would like to have a comprehensive list of best to worst creepypasta, or I wouldn't say best to worst. Most enjoyed to least enjoyed. I would like us to make a list. I'm pulling up my notes app out now, so
of what we have here.
of what we have here. And then as episodes continue, we will add to the list and places will shift. This is our first 3, so we will be adjusting the list as it happens. And this is how it's going to go, you know?
Yeah. In order, for me.
Most favorite to least favorite, in order.
Harbinger experiment, Russian sleep experiment, Gateway of the Mind.
I could not agree more.
And the only reason why Gateway is on the Mind is so low is because it's so short.
Is because it's so short. Like, all 3 are really good. I really liked all 3.
Yes, me too.
It's just there was Gateway of the Mind was more kind of like an appetizer. It's like the dinner roll of the meal that was both the Russian sleep experiment and the Harbinger experiment. It was good.
Yes.
It satisfied us for the time, but it ultimately did not carry as much meat on the bone as the other 2. And Harbinger just blew it out of the water.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Harbinger experiment took all of like the Russian sleep experiment and the Gateway of the Mind and kind of combined them. I know in terms of like what the experiment was about, but in terms of the suspension, the warnings, the split up team, and all of that, you know.
And this might be because I have never read the Harbinger experiment, so maybe further down the line as we get into different stories, my opinions might change. But as of this moment, I really did like the Harbinger experiment. And as of the current rankings, it is first place, the Harbinger experiment. Second place, the Russian sleep experiment. And third place, Gateway of the Mind.
So we had pretty similar.
Exact. We
Like,
had
yeah.
the exact same rankings. If we had a different system, we probably could have had more of a discussion. But as of the moment, that is our ranking.
Yeah. And again, the only reason why the Gateway of the Mind is so low is just because of how short.
I definitely...
There's not enough for me to compare it to the other ones,
Mhm.
but there's also, thus it doesn't explore as much and doesn't have as much suspension.
Mhm.
Like the Harbinger experiment did a great job suspension
Mhm.
and leaving you to think, because we were already theorizing what could be why this facility is built like this. We finished the story, and we were both genuinely surprised.
I think we were both really
I
locked
was-
in with it.
Yeah,
I did not...
it was good.
and this isn't a dig at you or anything, I didn't feel like you were as engaged with the other two stories as you were with this one. And that's just because of how
I
engaging this one was.
Yeah, the Russian sleep experiment I've heard before.
Russian sleep experiment is definitely suffering from success with just how popular it is. Everyone's heard. People who aren't even into creepypastas has heard the Russian sleep experiment. Gateway of the
Yeah,
Mind, it's good. We're not saying because it's third place it's bad. It is extremely good, and it's understandable why so many people find it to be so popular. It's
it's
just
just short. It's
short.
just
It
short.
doesn't give us as much as the other two.
There's not much suspense. It just gets right to it. So you're like, oh, it was scary, like watching a scary
Hmm.
Instagram reel. But this was
Yeah,
a long. This was something that you would
that is
sit down and
actually the
read for a
perfect
while.
way of how I would describe each of these. Gateway of the Mind is like an Instagram reel. Russian Sleep Experiment is like a scary YouTube video, and the Harbinger Experiment is like a proper movie or show, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. Like it,
it's
it,
well written,
each one fills you up a little bit more than the last one,
and they're all
and it
good
gives you
in their
different things
right.
too, because all of them are simply has science gone too far, but it goes different routes about it.
Yeah, and it's also like the most of them rotate around
Hmm.
humanity. Right? Like I'm noticing that like Russian sleep experiment is like what happens to humanity if thing that we eat. And the other thing is what happens if humanity if we get rid of that to talk to God. And then this one is what happens if someone is so lost in the idea of the supernatural that to risk humanity. Greed. They're so I wouldn't really consider it greed.
I saw it. I saw it a little bit differently. I think each of them had a nice escalation from the last one because it's what happens with humanity. Like Russian sleep experiment is humanity focused, and then it goes to what should we do to give up humanity in order to see the metaphysical or see the supernatural. And then in the Harbinger experiment, it is what if we force the supernatural to show itself? So it's the escalation from what's humanity's place, and then what's humanity's place against the supernatural, and then what happens when we place humanity in the same ring as the supernatural. I don't feel like I'm explaining my point as effectively as I could, but that's kind of the gist of what I'm getting with these sort. And honestly, this could not have been more perfect. We were originally planning on doing a different creepy pasta, and with how it shook out, it just didn't work. We're not going to name it just because we might get to it later, and then we'll talk about that more. But we picked the Harbinger experiment, or I picked it kind of last minute because it's like, oh, it's a story I haven't read. But it's been recommended to me enough to where I'm curious about what it is, so we'll do it on the podcast so that way I force myself to look at it. And this could not have been more perfect. This was genuinely such a clutch pull for this episode. So that is my closing statement.
It's
I'm happy with the fact that we chose that. This mic is starting to get on my nerves. I like it. It's really good quality.
Is that your
but
closing statement? Or there's the
my
but.
my
Okay.
my closing statement is definitely none of these thrilled me and made me scared. I will say it was very suspenseful. It was a good read, and I'm not trying to be like, oh, I you can't make me scared. You can't do this. I'm not trying to sound like
Hmm.
you know
No,
Timmy
I
Tough
get what you're
Knuckles,
saying. I
Timmy
get what you're
Tough
saying.
Knuckles over here, but it's more of like they were just entertaining to read
Hmm.
in general. And I really like them, and it makes me excited for what the others are that we're going to read.
I'm quite excited for the next episode as well. That should hopefully, unless I am an editing god and I crank this out like nobody's business, expect the at least next read and react out next month. Thank you for if you've made it this far. Thank you very so much for watching the first episode of Feardromida. Announcer, would you like to say goodbye to our audience?
Yes, have a good night. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have suggestions for us, please comment.
Comment, email us. There should be an official email tied to this YouTube channel.
Yes, and hopefully a
of sorts that you can tag us in if you must.
You mean, are you talking about the Instagram as well?
Well, I'm talking about, I don't know what we're going to have set up yet. So I don't want to say, like, look for
all
a Twitter, look
all
for
the
an
ways
Instagram,
for
look
us
for a
to
TikTok.
like get contacted will be in the description below. If you have a suggestion for a story, please send it to us. If we get enough hype around it, or if we're just like, none of the ones in the list seem interesting, we'll pick one of yours. I'm genuinely excited to see what comes from this podcast. I had a lot of fun recording this.
Me too. And I think as a way we should also include the links to these creepypastas.
Yes, we will include the links to
yep.
these stories if you want to read them yourself, or read them yourself. Next episode, we'll mention that we have the links down there at the start, so that way you can follow along with us. That's our mistake. Until next time, I don't know how to. Oh, wait, no, I got it. And remember, everyone, when you decide to peer beyond the veil, consider what may be peering back at you. Thank you, and have a good rest of your time, however short it may be.